Good evening. My name is Sarah Sanchez. I am the Director of Programs and Communications at the National Association for Urban Debate Leagues, better known as NUDL. And it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the final round of the 2023 Urban Debate National Championship, which is coming to you virtually after some inclement weather in Dallas forced us to move to get all people out of Dallas as quickly as possible to beat the storms past year on Sunday. Thankfully, all of the lessons we learned during the pandemic have ensured that we can bring this virtual final round to debaters from urban debate leagues all across the country. And with that, I want to introduce tonight's debaters. Representing the Los Angeles Metropolitan Debate League on the affirmative from Port of Los Angeles High School, Delmi Lopez Perez and June Kwan. On the negative, representing the Minnesota Urban Debate League and St. Paul Central High School, we have Kaden Meyer and Maren Lien. And with that, I will turn it over to our outstanding debaters. Congratulations to all of you on making it to the final round of the Urban Debate National Championship.
First for speech and
Yeah.
Muted.
Unmuted.
Okay, so this is my thank you speech to everyone. I still can't believe that I've reached this point of my life. I never knew that there were so many levels of debates and they became like so complicated that I could possibly go to Texas for a national tournament or to other places me and my partner have gone to, like Berkeley or Jack Howe. It has become so surreal to travel to another state, to reach a bid round for the TOC, or even breaking at an invitational tournament. I am so grateful for the achievements me and my partner have reached, especially for our school, making history in our like league. This is the first time in our school's history that we have accomplished reaching the finals of the UNDC or even getting to the UNDC. The gratitude I feel is so immense to everyone. So I'd like to say a special thank you to Ms. Chase, our coach, who has to deal with us and go with us to Texas, San Francisco, and take hour drives to reach our invitationals. Her commitment to us and her faith on us that allows us to reach these places. So thank you for her for being there for us. I would also like to say thank you to Joseph Barkman, our other coach, who has helped me develop a lot of my debate skills for the beginning of the school year, and I've been able to greatly improve and have honed my skills thanks to him and his determination in us to becoming a great team. He has helped us immensely, coaching us to be the best and making history for our school. I owe him tons because he takes time out of his day to make those 2 to 6 hours drives to help us. He takes 2 hours out of his day to coach us on Zoom, especially the weeks before the UNDC where we would have to practice debates every other day. And a special thank you to my partner June, who took a chance on me and has had the patience to deal with me. He has helped me a lot in understanding how debate works and the complex arguments and everything that goes into the debate. So thank you, June, because our partnership has become a friendship that I wouldn't change. And of course, my parents who allow me to be this committed to debate and give me their blessing and permission to travel out of state and allow me to be on my own. So thank you for giving me that vote of confidence. And last but not least, thank you to LAMDL for giving me this opportunity to reach this point of my life. They ensure that low income students like me and my partner have these opportunities and allows us to reach places that we normally wouldn't. And so the YC should be sent right now. Did everyone get it?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I'll start. These autonomous weapons are being developed and deployed and utilized by the military. They are AI-powered weapons that can target and kill autonomously without human intervention. Trager and Luca, 22, robots with the ability to humans use knowledge to become ubiquitous. The world does urgently need you approach to laws. Those countries have called for a ban political and capital morally repugnant should be prohibited. Laws that facilitate violence on a large scale. Racial recognition, target individual groups that rights certain disorder, abuse of violence, state malicious committing political assassination, ethnic cleansing. Laws are always malfunctioning, including by mistaking civilians. Up to now, proliferation regime that exists for nuclear weapons that are adversaries who continue to develop laws. Next, AI control laws are inherently unreliable, reproduce discrimination along the vectors of race, gender, class, vast and able-bodiedness, Turkey 18. Also, regulated gender raised much of the discussions about law. AWS have focused on military. We must consider the reality of the world that tech may be used. Algorithms are perpetuating injustice for many. I think gender and poverty negatively bias the decision being delegated to machines. It is rarely possible to get a clear info about casualties and damage. Imagine dangerous disclosures for targeting. 2. We cannot classify a person or object as a legitimate consequences of bias and facial recognition. BBW use information requires to obtain data with false recognition was 95%. All systems perform better on male versus females, and the lighter the skin, the more accurate. Next, AI algorithms and laws have a bias against people of color, particularly Black people. Burrabi 20. Military robots will be given freedom to take a human life, especially bias have not become resolved. Tech we create are disrupting Black communities through racial profiling, facial recognition systems more accurately identifying white faces. Next, specifically, they're designed to carry out massacres and acts of mass surveillance in communities. Pascal 20. A country that use such weapons will be excited on machines that lose on slaughter or comes on deployment of military grade forces is a warning to citizens. Tech of control and destruction may be used against us in the future. Attempts to code law and things to include robots difficulty, racist difficulties. A key principle of warfare has been discrimination to distinguish between combatants and civilians. Combatants were rarely wear uniforms, making it harder to distinguish. Warfare has become more humane. Drones can meet out surveillance to pacify while avoiding bloodshed. The weapons of anamyastic post-colonial violence system we conducted test surveillance of population. The drone destroys differentiates between commanders and non-commanders. The disturbing fusion of war policing. Next, laws are the ultimate form of dehumanization. Algorithmic biases ensure discriminatory targeting along gender, racial lines, which guarantees the deaths of marginalized communities and the execution of activists that resist the system. Active 20. Also, weapons would be the pinnacle of the fighting for struggle, the empathy and conscience and emotion complete the process of dehumanization of warfare. This dehumanization also includes sexual violence, facial recognition, struggles to recognize people of color, voice recognition, the struggles to women's voice and non-American access. This bias programmed into weapon systems contributes to dehumanizing by turning them into profiles and expendable targets. Also, weapons facilitate profiling, targeting dehumanization, the death of marginalized as well as activists. Next, it consolidates anti-blackness through algorithms that perpetuate violence on Black people for the sake of scientific advancement. Ramsey Jones 19. AI weaponized for communities could be deadly military threats to persons of color, races, operates at every level, tech developed by the white males, national security, liberal analysis that fails to recognize dark skin women position when as norms as reason within the white dominated world. Algorithms collect frequently submitted entries to reflect statistically popular racist sentiments. Lethal weapons make it easier for POC to be at the mercy of unlawful killings and difficult to attain justice. Scientific advances devised by experiments on Black women. Sciences that inflicted on communities of color rather than aided many prohibit fully autonomous weapons. Next, the impact is that dehumanization. Internal into history's worst atrocities. Its impact is incalculable. Barobi 97. Dehumanization destructive we're told is greater than any other war, plague, famine, or natural calamity. Nature of civilized societies beyond calculation. Dehumanization, nuclear war, environmental apocalypse, and genocide. We will become things, they become dispensable. When people are dispensable, every just atrocity can be justified. Once justified, they seem to be inevitable. Dehumanization is evil's most powerful weapon. Next plan. The United States federal government substantially increases security cooperation with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in the area of artificial intelligence by banning artificial intelligence lethal autonomous weapon systems. Onto sovereignty. The ban is popular to allies. It's just a matter of U.S. buy-in and backing. Human Rights Watch 23. The Iraqi concern of autonomous weapons is inadequate. The U.S. pursuit of autonomous weapons is a recipe for disaster. National policy to address the risk. The U.S. is investing heavily in the military applications of AI to autonomous weapons. So the weapon that can selectively engage targets without further intervention by a person. And the record restraints loopholes does nothing to curb the proliferation of autonomous weapons. Also out of step with widely supported international proposals. Most treaty proponents call for prohibition. The U.S. direct fails to reach this far. More than 67 countries working for a new law. You should support the negotiation to prohibit and restrict. Next, NATO is key. Their standards ensure follow on PECA 22. NATO wants to set AI standards. The ideal organization set standards for the military applications of AI, but those efforts will happen in NATO. Once NATO sets a standard, it becomes a gold standard in the respective field. The alliance's AI strategy will set ethical guidelines and makes it completely by sharing human is responsible for the actions. NATO is a great place to think about technology. Next, ban stops completely. Regulations, risk circumvention, 117. Governments founded to supplement the limits for autonomous weapons. The CCW banning building lasers to provide President Campaign has urged the state a ban rather than regulate because a complete prohibition is clear and needs to enforce and partial regulation eliminates room for different chirps. Strong and unified effort is needed to prevent the development of autonomous weapons. NATO is key to building international momentum against laws. Reduced as a 2021. NATO in support of ban on the development. NATO supported multinational cooperation with NATO leadership will such weapons could be banned. Similar to the initiatives that prohibited landmines and coastal munitions. The comparative and necessity of NATO STRATCOM is an opportunity for member states to lead in the global effort to ban killer robots, commitment to strengthening the rules-based international order. Onto framing. Focusing on survival at the expense of rights is a dangerous orientation towards ethics that justifies history's worst atrocities. what has something to do. In the name of survival, manner of social political evils have been committed against the rights of individuals. Survival was one of the official legitimization of Nazism under survival. South Africa imposed an apartheid, the destruction of villages. There seems to be no imaginable evil which some group is not willing to inflict on the other. For the sake of survival and rights, the liberties, the dignities, the concerns allowed, ignore, suppress, destroy other fundamental rights and values. The potential tyranny of survival is as a value is capable of wiping out other values. Survival becoming the section for working a destructive system that will stop at nothing and prices the human creation. There's more reason why an effort should be made. Next, consequentialism and will utilitarianism. Miss the point. You're not ethically responsible how others respond to you. You doing an ethical act, even if there's a disadvantage to the act, you're only more morally culpable for the ethics of your own action. You're worth 82. When there's a connection between some performing some action and some other occurring harm, a more responsibility is removed. An example of this, the principal MLK was repeatedly told that because he was morally responsible for the deaths that ensued, he by the principle of intervening action, if it was King's opponents who were responsible, King might have replied that the Republic now were saving if the price violation of the civil rights of Black Americans. Next, focus on existential risk is whiteness and is based on an epistemological flawed logic that allows modern day genocides. Matthew 15. Effective altruism is a movement that has begun to develop a culture and a range of warring pathologies. The iceberg white essentially is increasingly obsessed with ideas and data that reflects the class position and interest rather than desire to help actual people. Global poverty is a rounding error. Should we care about the world today at all? The idea is human extinction is far worse than anything that could happen today. We find that the value of reducing existential risk by mere 1 billion of 1 billion of 1% is worth 100 billion times as much as a billion lives. The number of future humans will never exist if humans go extinct. It's so great that reducing the risk can be expected to save 100 billion more lives than preventing the genocide of 1 billion people. You could use this logic to defend it just about anything. Arguments give a false sense of statistical precision by slapping probability values on beliefs. Next, additional refuse the 1% risk of doctrine and pure extinction collapses all policymaking. Miscal 08. 1% doctrine is intellectually incoherent and irrelevant. It cannot be applied constantly in the world with any potential. But disaster scenarios is that each of these risks would deserve all of our attention. We cannot address all of them simultaneously. We'd have to begin to prioritize. But why then should we only make these trade-offs between responses to disaster scenarios? Why treat the unlikely but cataclysmic event as something that cannot be integrated into all other calculations we make? We are constantly risking death. Any creature that adopted the precautionary principle would neither be able to act nor act to would nowhere discover perfect safety. Next, the representations matter. The reps use are vital to assessing the truth claims and the shapes our policies. Jordan, representation through which decision makers make sense of political reality. Representation are not objective; they are founded on each other's actors, cognitive, social, and emotional examples. Representation of a foreign political reality includes how decision making actors will act upon the reality. Representation constraints and enable policy decision makers will adopt the of this. Other states that limit the course of action are political thinkable. They identify how state represent another state to help them understand why certain foreign policies have been adopted while others excluded. The way with which one sees, interprets, and imagines the other delineates the course of action one will adopt in order to deal with this other.
Sorry, we're just making sure of our tech right now. There we go. Hi.
Hi.
Alrighty. Getting my timer set up now. Is the app ready for cross-X?
Yeah.
Perfect. Alrighty. So what exactly is like dehumanization for your Baruba 97 card?
It's basically saying the way that laws have like systematically inputted the way that people of color are viewed is like dehumanizing, like reducing people to numbers and reducing them to targets, make people like dispensable, basically.
Is this like an ontological claim?
No.
Okay. And then where's the warrant in your HRW 93 card that is popular with NATO?
So if you look towards the bottom, it says more than 67 countries are working for a new law. Shows that it's internationally popular. The line right under says that the US just needs to get on board because the directive that they set out in January of 2023 doesn't meet the requirements that the
So the US is, sorry, so the US is the only reason why this plan hasn't been put in place yet?
That's not the only argument that will make it. we'll make the argument that US backing is probably extremely crucial to plan success.
Okay, so then what are any other blockages right now in the status quo to it? Oh, sorry.
You're good.
Oh, and yeah, and what's your role of the judge?
The role of the judge.
Yeah, like role of the judge for your plan and like in the ballot.
Best solve structural violence.
Okay. And then your claim about like bans are easier and that's why the plan is a ban. Is this your only claim on why the plan is a ban and not a regulation because it's easier to enforce?
We're saying that regulations are like worse than bans. That's why a ban solves for completely like.
Why are regulations worse?
Circumventions.
How?
There are instances of nations like having the restrictions put on them and then them circumventing right away to develop laws.
What nations?
We'll make the argument that Saudi Arabia will circumvent if you really need us to.
You were referring to it in like the past tense, like it has happened before. Do you have any examples of countries that this has happened in?
Yet, so it's impossible to circumvent a law that hasn't
Also,
happened.
are there any questions? There are any countries in NATO that would do that?
Oh yeah, are there any NATO countries that would circumvent it? Yeah, like your claim about circumvention, does that apply to any
Say
NATO
that.
countries?
The easier the restrictions get, the easier it is for them to circumvent when they see a way out with lethal autonomous weapons.
So like what countries are you referring to when you're saying they?
Well, okay, I don't think we need to specify a single specific country. We think that having easier restrictions make it easier to circumvent. So harsher restrictions or harsher, I guess, banning is better.
That's just about time. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm not gonna take any prep, but I am gonna give a little thank you speech. It won't be as good as the 1A's was. I did not rewrite this as well. I think the first person that I definitely have to thank is Martin and I's varsity coach, Marshall. They've been our varsity coach for the last 2 years, and they've been the most helpful person in the entire world from a competitive standpoint, obviously, but also being a rock for us mentally and emotionally during some difficult tournaments. And we definitely wouldn't be able to be here both competitively, but also just through the debate stress without them. I also then have to thank my wonderful partner, Marin, whose friendship and emotional support has meant the world. Miss Hawksford, who Martin and I have been middle school coaching with for the last 2 years, and who was the very first debate coach that I had, means the world to me and inspired me to go down to the career path that I would like. Our teacher coach, Gents, who has provided a team energy and community that has made it so that debate was able to expand at Central and kept everything positive. Our other coach, Juniper, who came with us to Dallas and was an amazing time. 2 other MNUDL coaches, Sandy and Sky, who have been supportive for me as I've explored with identity arguments. And then just a big shout out to Jake Sweet and everybody in the MNUDL who makes it possible for Central to have a debate team. And then as well as both of my parents who have sacrificed much time with their child so that I could be at tournaments every single weekend for the last 4 years. And then just all of my friends and everybody on the Central team as well, who've made it so that debate is a great environment in which I feel like I can grow and really learn how to use my voice. So with that being said, I'm going to download and send out this file real quick. Oh yeah, and then sorry, what's the conclusion on speech drop?
I believe we're just going to stick to an email chain.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, it should be sent. Let me know when everybody gets it. Okay, 1 judge. 2 judges. Or opponents. Okay, unless anybody verbally objects in the next like 5 seconds, I'm gonna go with the 1 NC. It is someone starting recording and stopping recording? Because I'm getting like an audio notification for it when that is occurring. Cool.
How many off case?
4 off and then case.
Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. First off, T increase. 1, to increase means expanding already existing cooperation. Buckley 06. Increase means something where there must be necessarily to have been existing to be compared to determine whether an increase has occurred. Violation. The affirmative does a decrease in security cooperation because it bans any use of laws with NATO. Standards. 1, limits. Explodes limits as it allows the F to decrease any one of the 1,000 NATO tech initiatives. 2, predictability. They ruin our ability to predict by shifting the lit base. 3, grounds. Ruin key net grounds which are based on links to an increase in NATO security cooperation. Voters. 1, fairness. Ruins pre-round prep time because they makes us going blind. Ruins debate fairness by also waiting out to key topic links. Fairness is key to keeping a competitive activity debate alive. 2, education. Pre-round predictability is key to the education of research as well as a fair division of grounds, which is key to indoor class, which is the second form of education. They ruin both killing debate, funding, and eventually debate. On to the second off, regulation CP. 1, the United States federal government should adopt minimally just principles for military artificial intelligence. 2, it hard codes ethical constraints into autonomous weapons that promotes humanitarian warfare by mitigating human error. Galliot. 18, for military to be lawful, AMS not become humanitarian areas to achieve as military just autonomy is required. The weapons could be embedded in AI to identify the symbol of Red Cross and a border strike. Additionally, protect sites of religious service, schools and hospitals, autonomous systems, evaluate and decision about in their codes so they meet ethical and legal standards. MNAI could operate a processing an elementary suppressor of human-generated action in accordance with constraints. Harder coded rather than the soft code, meaningless interpretation would be required. Combatants seek to deceive them AI by using a periodified yet such may improve distinction by cross-checking and identifying anomalies for them in AI. Respond only to unexpected presence recently. Algorithms have been used to generate a camouflage yet. Researchers have demonstrated no errors and life trials. The original team are confused with detectors with classifiers. AI can make life decisions, mitigate suffering caused by weapons. They lack AI. And next, current ethical standards for military AI are ineffectual, causing private sector backlash that prevents autonomous weapons rollout. New industry-inspired guidelines are key. Galliot 22. Regulating AI to make it safe recently become a public concern. Most debated remains of military applications of AI. Any frameworks for AW used to make parallel codes with codes that already exist to violate civilian tech. First, represented by principles, the U.S. DoD commits to commitment has not corresponded with equivalent efforts by perfect competencies. The contract to them for military hesitation is exemplified by problem made by reported after initial collaboration, controversy among civil staff, and public pressure induced global to divest itself due to the impossibility of establishing which AI can be weaponized. This code never commits to be ethically just and sees some from security regarding whether ethical norms govern civilian and military AI. Principles may be avoided obvious ethical violations and guide minimally just AI to inform AWS. Google is just one example of wave ethics have swept Silicon Valley. Potentially controversial applications may impact their reputation, ranging from small to large scale developers of professional bodies and research institutes who work in technical aid to AI. Next, autonomous weapons check conflict by establishing coercive bargaining power. The legacy of nuclear arms proves. Rabkin 17. Precision opens a wider range of attacks that make Wake Forest less discovered. Drones could hinder critical nodes, roads, bridgeways, railways, and other transportation hubs. Nations should be able to attack if destruction courses an enemy and brings the war closer to an end at a lower cost of the war. Superheroes have adopted such an approach with military techniques. These threatens most of the rivals and nation populations. Commanders can pressure their enemies. The leadership to compromise or concede rather than destroy. And airport drones could disable radar communication and transportation links. New weapons tech will lead to peaceful settlements in the world best by revanches powers. Next, UNCP. 1, the United Nations should ban laws. 2, UN solves best. Garcia 22. Focusing on emerging tech marks an evolution of the role of the UN in promoting diplomacy. UN is a primary inclusive and the ideal form where norms and the emerging tech can be created. The CSC met to usher in emerging tech into the highest level of diplomatic efforts. The Council concerning decisions on enforced in international relations. The Security General's roadmap for co-op aims to bridge the digital divide between countries, create transparency, curbs, info, protect the infrastructure and dignity. The proactive and preventive role plays the UN as a cornerstone action in emerging tech for threats, geopolitical tensions, climate crisis, global mistrust in tech, crimes and hate and misinfo and oppress people. Next, DIBDA. 1, the defense industry is growing and stable now. Future purchases enable increased innovation of the defense market. Mortar intelligence 22. The U.S. defense market is projected to grow to USD 557.78 billion during 2021 to 2022. The defense sector is expected to remain stable and even grow as the United States does not reduce its defense budget and remains committed to sustaining its military capabilities. The U.S. defense percentage grew by 5.3% as the U.S. envisions to retain its decade superiority over rival forces in terms of weaponry, a significant inflow of monetary resources anticipated to occur during the upcoming period, thereby driving the U.S. defense market. Next, a precautionary laws ban destroys the private sector's ability to innovate AI technologies in all areas. Castro and McLaughlin, 19. Many groups have started movements to ban lethal autonomous weapons if enacted. It would slow research into AI. U.S. defense agencies have significant funding for tech advancements. Much of the research to support autonomous weapons would yield dual use that could be used for commercial purposes of fully autonomous and will rely on the same algorithms and data used to develop autonomous vehicles for civilian use. Next, DIB innovation prevents offshore manufacturing and enables U.S. global leadership. UDEC 10. Avoiding domestic manufacturing based on national security, nevertheless, the ability of a firm to innovate and prevent defense critical technologies or devices that it produces for defense market increasingly depends on its ability to preserve and draw upon the technological edge it is attained in commercial business. The loss of production facilities can lead to the loss of innovation capabilities, which would dangerously undermine the nation's ability to maintain strong defense space. The migration of manufacturing is associated with the weakening innovation abilities, the transfer of quantity and technologies, and decline in the United States overall technological leadership in the world. Next, hegemony is empirically the most stable system and deters all conflicts. Decline causes transition words. Kagan 17. As the declining capacity of the U.S. and its allies to maintain the present world order revision as powers the existing order collapse into brutal anarchy, the world collapse. World orders do collapse. It is unexpected and rapid and violent. In the first decade of the 20th century, the world's finest minds predicted an end to the great power of conflict. The most everything working 4 years later, we are on that pathway. China and Russia collapsing British powers. They are dissatisfied with global configuration. Both seek to restore hegemonic dominance. For China, the means of the dominance of these Asia, Japan, South Korea. For Russia, means Central Asia, Central and Eastern Europe, both seeking to weaken America in that order. The art system is directed their ambitions during American primacy. For China and Russia, have participated in beneficiaries of the open international economic system the U.S. created. So long as the system functions, they have more to gain by playing into them by overturning the greatest check has been the military and economic power of the U.S. China has had to contemplate facing their military and economics during the world superpowers. They have to contend with the richest and most technological advanced nations. The strong global position enjoyed by the U.S. and its allies have declared any serious challenge. Chinese and Russian leaders fear the aggressive motives would backfire. The president has not only depend on American power and coherence and unity. The U.S. has had to play its part in principle, guarantor of the order, but the order's economic core has also had to remain healthy. On to the case page, starting with solvency. 1. International coalition fails. Laws use inevitable. Their circumvention argument proves. Hybrid 22. A realistic assessment of the state of killer robots being developed in reference to what technological processes of power pacing deliberations over containment of splintering international order. Nation states are readily violating humanitarian laws and treaties anyways, while others seeking new ways to gain a strategic edge in an increasingly hostile multipolar geopolitical environment. Next, the technology used in laws is getting more accurate by the day. The affirmative is trying to reject a life-saving technology based on flawed analysis. Hash 20. Some facial recognition systems exhibit lower levels of bias than others. A recent National Institute of Standards Technology study identifies several algorithms had consistent results across facial identities. It shows that facial recognition systems don't inherently have high rates of bias and can be improved. There's no way to completely eradicate bias, but facial recognition technology is already as good as better than humans at finding correct matches. It's much easier to train an AI model to reduce bias and eliminate cross-race effect than it is to eradicate bias in a law enforcement officer crime. But the technology continue to improve with regards to accuracy across control and gender and dramatically reduce bias across range of criminal justice cases. Next, calculation is good, inevitable, and ethical. Livermore 08. Governmental decisions are fundamentally different from personal decisions. They affect people in the aggregate. Governmental decision making and seem to ignore what makes individuals. It is a prerequisite for compassion needed. Cost benefit analysis can seem harsh, but such an approach is necessary. Saving the most lives requires us to step back, feeling to use these tools amounts to abandoning our duties to one another. We exercise compassion by recognizing numbers represent living human beings. Calamities fail results from the failure to use reason, and thus the accountable of the judge is to act as a policymaker first. Onto the advantage. Cross apply. There no inherency. The U.S. has made it clear that any use of laws needs to have human intervention. We post-state them. NATO 22 states have been being rather clear in expressing the need for responsibility to be attributed to human beings, often referred to as human machine teaming is in the loop system that requires human intervention. Reverse operation provides human intervention if needed. The United States has taken a clear stance on this, asserting that the human being should always be kept in the decision-making loop for the use of laws of the ultimate decider and the use of lethal force in the battlefield. And next, laws are more efficient and make war humane. They also reduce civilian casualties, which Hybrid 22. The United States has a moral imperative to pursue autonomous weapons as their adoption would make warfare humane by reducing civilian casualties and incidents through decreasing target misidentification. The result in what the U.S. Department of Defense labels unintended engagements. Autonomous weapon systems may be able to assess a target's legitimacy and make a decision factors with more accuracy and objectivity. The outcome would be a more efficient use of lethal force that limits collateral damage and saves innocent lives. That is time. Would you like a marked copy? Oh shoot, I don't have my earbud in.
Which cards did y'all not read?
It's not that I didn't read anything. There's just a lot at the bottom I didn't get to. Like I stopped. What'd you say?
Yeah, if we can get one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm gonna keep the full card that I stopped midway through in the file, but I'm gonna mark where I stopped at, if that makes any sense.
Okay. You got it.
Okay, should be sent, and then as soon as I get water, I'm open for class. Oh, shoot, yeah, totally, Lauren. Sorry, I just saw that. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay.
Are you good?
Yep.
Okay, start. Why would regulations be better if a ban can completely solve?
So that has two net benefits. The first thing is the defense industrial base DA. A ban completely destroys the defense industrial base, which obviously triggers the link, whereas regulations enable defense industries to continue to produce and increase their future investment, which is like the second part of the tag on the Mordor intelligence. And beyond that, the second thing is that the use of lethal autonomous weapons with regulations is more ethical than a ban. That's the combination of both the Galliot evidence as well as the HES 20 card on the solvency page and the beginning of the Hybrid 22 card, which I read. So
Okay,
one
let's
external,
talk
one
about your
internal.
S20 card. It says biases are inevitable, so there's nothing we can do about them. How is that a good way to look at things?
What do you mean? Like, or sorry, could you point to the specific line, and what do you mean by
It says
best
there
way
is
to
no
look at
way
things?
to completely eradicate bias, but facial recognition technology is already as good as is. The 8 minutes of the 1AC turns the fact that technology is already good, which means that only thing you have left is that there's no way to actually get rid of bias. So how is this a good way to look at things? So you're like, oh, there's nothing we can do about it, so let's just not ban it.
Well, we're saying that like this specific thing is saying that laws are better at eradicating bias than humans. Like that's like the full line is there's no way to completely eradicate bias in humans or algorithms, but facial technology is already as good or better than humans at finding correct matches. If you scroll down later into the card, it says it's much easier to train an AI model to reduce bias and eliminate the cross-race effect than it is to eradicate bias in every security guard, law enforcement officer, and witness to a crime. So it's basically saying the fact that like
Okay. The laws that the 1AC talks about is not in terms of law enforcement or policing. So why does that matter if it's better at facial recognizing in like the law enforcement stuff?
because the technology that's being applied here in terms of facial recognition technology is the exact same, regardless of the specific applications that this card is talking about. It's the use of the exact same technology. We'll cross-apply cards on the regular or on the DIBDA to prove that. So yeah, doesn't matter.
Okay, if the UN doesn't have a military like branch, how does the UN solve?
The UN has the ability to ban it.
How if it doesn't have like a military like power structure?
Like
NATO.
like the US, like just because of the fact that the UN doesn't have their own independent like military that is under specific UN control does not mean that they don't have the ability to like
Wait, okay,
implement.
Okay, can I know how the consensus at UN works? So is it all 196 nations have to say yes, or how does it work?
Like, what are we fiating? Is that your question? Or like how consensus
Like,
works?
as in when you try to pass a bill in the UN, who
Yeah.
has to say yes? Is it all of the nations? Is it 2/3? Is it 1/3?
It would be like the Security Council that is doing this. Like that's what the
Okay,
card
who's on the
specifies.
Security Council?
What'd you say?
Who's on the Security Council?
That's time. I don't know what the policy is for this tournament. Am I allowed to answer that?
If you don't want to, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm.
we'll,
Are you running prep?
yeah, we'll start 8 minutes now. Okay, am I unmuted? Okay, we marked it at 7:34. Am I unmuted? All right. Yeah, but before I start my speech, I'll also take this opportunity to thank some people. I know the news got around, so a lot of my friends are also watching. So yeah. Yeah, so I didn't really think I would have to first speech, so it's like pretty rushed, but hope you'll understand. So first to NODL, SMU, all the judges and all the leagues that participated and those who like give back to the community with their local urban debate leagues, I think we all thank you. And outside of those, I think first I start off with my parents. There's definitely been a lot more people and debaters and coaches that have contributed to the success in terms of like providing me with cards and like logs and strategic analysis in my rounds. But I guess all of those would have been impossible without my parents' support and their allowance of me into the activity. I hear a lot of people's thank you speeches that kind of start off with like, oh, my parents like forced me to get in debate, so thank you to my parents for forcing me into debate. I guess I'm kind of different in that my parents this year kind of begged me to not go to tournaments because they wanted me to focus on school. And so when I was like, I guess, so in love with the activity, we got in a lot of arguments about, do I go to debate tournaments or do I do my homework on the weekend? But other than that, I mean, they still let me go to the tournaments and go to the practices, so thank you. And just not just in debate, but also just the love and support that I received all throughout my life shaped me into the person I am. So I'm forever indebted to the service. And then just some non-debate related, but non-family members. My fourth grade teacher, I don't think she'll watch this, but coming into the US, her place in my life was crucial in integrating into the life in America. I might not even be fluent or confident in my ability to speak English and articulate the way I'm able to in rounds. Without her, I have lots to thank for her. I think she made life here a lot easier. I'll thank some of my friends, Jonathan, Tim, Brian, and Jaden, four of my closest friends from different places and activities. They were a crucial part in also shaping me to the person I am today, even outside of debate. Since elementary and middle school, they kind of held me together. On to debate. Thanking my league, LAMDL, they were kind of the launching pad for my success in debate. Without LAMDL, I mean, our school probably wouldn't even have a program. I think starting my journey as a novice online and slowly climbing my ranks up through the league, befriending a lot of the debaters and also the judges and the representatives of the league. I think I'm like J-Flo, Amber, Albert, two judges like Elvis, Chris, Wade, all I met this year, Diego, and them. And those who I forget, I apologize, but I still love you all dearly. And on to my school. Thank you for providing the resources whenever we ask, getting us that ride to the airport or getting us some food to eat at overnight tournaments. If you're watching this by any chance, Mr. Mora, please fund us for more tournaments next year. Now to my coaches, Joseph Barquin, LAMDL representative, we started working this year. The amount of effect that he had on Zelmi and I and our strategic, I guess our strategies throughout the year was huge. And to Ms. Chase as well, thank you for coming along with us. I checked and we apparently went to 11 tournaments this year together. That's a lot. And 2 on the plane, 3 at other local high schools and 7 around the LA region. I know that it's sometimes pretty hard for her too, but hopefully the success that we have at the tournaments can kind of pay you back. Yeah, and Barkman again coming into our program to resurrect our chance at being varsity champions. The coaching has been instrumental. And to my partners, Jade, we started off together with novice champions, got to finals and semis a couple of times, won city champs. I think you are probably a big reason as to why I continued debating my sophomore year. And speaking about my sophomore year, Michaela, who is currently debating at Liberty. I'm not sure if she's watching this. Good luck at her tournament this weekend. But yeah, I think Michaela was like that bridge that helped me get into varsity debate. When I started last year, we definitely struggled in our first couple of tournaments, but we laughed it off. We worked together, stayed up late nights, and I'm here now, so it paid off. And some partners at camp, Henry, we had lots of fun, lots of late conversations and arguing during round, but it definitely was a fun experience for me. And also Delmi. Delmi struggled a lot with partnerships. She had 7 different partners before me in a season and a half. But yeah, I'm glad to have been her long-term partner this year, and I'm looking forward to a lot more. I know that I demanded a lot on her, her first ever varsity tournament was on a national circuit, and it definitely is a steep jump for any debater. And I thank her for being able to keep up with me and being the most committed debater I've ever worked with. And some friends from LAMDL, I'll shout out some schools: Harvard Teacher Prep, Huntington Park, Lincoln, Downtown Magnet, especially Sharika and David. We had fun this past weekend. We made a lot of great memories, and then also ELC. And then CGNO, my lab, my 4 weeks at Michigan were integral to my success. It was a hefty investment, and I wasn't exactly sure if it was going to work out, but again, it looks like it did. And my lab was really supportive. Even when I had COVID, they brought me food into the other side of the dorms. And when I struggled in the beginning, my partner sending me text messages, telling me to time the 1AC and time the 1NC, see if I can finish it. They were all supportive, and it got me to this point. And I'll shout out I'm sorry, it's getting long. I have a lot of people to thank. Hopefully it'll be shorter next year. Some specific people to thank. Aaron and Colson from Notre Dame, from camp. Also Henry, my camp partner. Lots of late night conversations, staying up till 2, 3 in each other's dorms prepping. Dylan, thanks for giving me COVID after basketball. I still love you. And the Popeyes chicken sandwich I bought you in January is long remembered. Jordan, by far the greatest contributor to my success, I guess, with other debaters. The negative strategies that we worked on, and also the multiple counter plans that I just received from and files throughout you from the season, and even for quarters this tournament. And you sent me a lot of cards, wrote me some blocks, and gave me strategies. And maybe I'm like inflating his contribution to my success a little bit. He wanted to be included in the thank you speech. Yeah, and also just some friends across the country in Georgia at Woodward Academy, Zaria, Rashab, Sophia, I'm sure they're all watching. Also Claire, Risha, Maurice, Omar, and everyone else that has contributed to my success were just there for me to talk about debate at night after every tournament. Thank you. And lastly, Jason and Michaela, the unstoppable trio, us 3. We prepared for national qualifiers last year. Pretended like we were doing something together, putting together case negs and 1ACs, and hoped that it was going to work. Newsflash, it didn't. But it's been a year and a month, and it definitely did work. We've all come so far. Jason also sending us help and support throughout the season. Michaela debating at college and seeing the success that she probably never got to see with me. So congrats to her. And without the alumni system of considerable small, but also so significant, all 3 of us, I don't think would have made it this far. So thank you all. And that being said, I'll send out the 2AC. Let me check if it's the right version. Yeah. Okay, 2AC sent. The order is going to be case, T, regulations, UN, and the DIB. Did everyone get the doc? Okay. On case, vote out to ban laws of lethal autonomous technology that has inherent flaws in a system that's racist, sexist, and problematic. There are weapons deployed and are simply being deployed in the status quo that have numerous dangerous consequences of development, will doom countries affected by them into racialized oppression to lead them to more authoritarian control. This looks like the robots targeting specific POC that will likely miscalculate and target the wrong people. The impact is dehumanization, the internal link to all of the world's atrocity, and the brink is a sliding scale, meaning the more we wait to ban them, the worse the impact gets. And on to framing. Extend their framing of deontology. Coming out of the 1NC, they have conceded the framing question, which is that we aren't responsible for the consequences after we make an ethical choice, and it ensures that you don't commit bad acts for a good result. And ethics matters. The Matthews card, their prioritization of extinction is the very problem in debate, where we shift things to position and interest instead of helping others. It refuses to see structural impacts because it is akin to rounding error, and instead of an important issue, this is a horrible way to view the world because it allows for people to defend anything with little justification as long as it's solved. And this props up whiteness as it makes it difficult to marginalize people to be heard and extend mass kill, which is the 1% risk doctrine, and extinction is intellectually incoherent and is irrelevant in the real world. There are dozens of risks around us and would need to be impossible to deal with them all at once, as we need to prioritize which ones to be resolved first. This is not what we should be doing. If you do low prob and high magnitude impact framing, we'd have serial policy paralysis with no action, and representations matter the most because it shapes our politics and policies, because good representations are key to shaping good real world changes, and utilitarianism is horrible because it'll justify anything if it's considered a net benefit. And the role of the judges to vote for the team that best combats racism and structural violence in the status quo. And like we said, if you act as a policymaker first, it means that you always look at the consequences, which means that even if the consequences are bad, or even if the consequences are if the consequences are good, it will mean that you make a bad choice to make or lead to good consequences, which means that you need to prioritize ethical choices first. And the first thought on international coalitions, we will make the argument that it works. That's all of NATO key solvency, and circumvention doesn't work, doesn't prove our arguments, because a ban would solve. Circumventions only work in the context that it's not a ban in regulations, which is a takeout to the regulations counter plan. And technology, they say that technology is good, but this card is so messed up because it makes the argument that bias is inevitable. It's not inevitable if you ban it. You're trying to justify the violence for no apparent reason if you haven't isolated why lethal autonomous are completely necessary to carry out whatever the tasks they're trying to isolate, and then any other alternative AI technology, then it shows that banning solves. And they try to do an inherency takeout on with the NATO 22 card with the human rights watch 23 from the 1AC sites. The directive of 3009 on autonomy in weapon systems issued in January 2023 defines an autonomous weapon as a weapon that can select and engage targets without further intervention by a person. This postdates are evidenced by like 4 months from January of 2023. And on to T. 1, a decrease in quantity is not a decrease in security cooperation. 2, as we meet, the plan expands existing cooperation over laws by standards to ensure they are banned. And 3 is the counterintuitive. Increase means the cost of decrease, both in at all. 1, remember, confirm the cause and effect relationship, and what's the dictionary but the definition of transitive increase is the cause to become greater at to grant augment. And security cooperation is the provision for defense articles and services. The plan is the provision for defense articles and services on NATO, and they haven't also defined security cooperation, which means that the only team that defines security cooperation is, which is what the increase is in context to, is the team that you are airing to DISCA 19. We refer to security cooperation as a method to provide foreign partners with defense articles and services, and the app increase overall cooperation via norms and provision of standards. That's Trudeau and force preferred. A is predictability. Our interest from a distinct court with intent to define, and their evidence doesn't assume the syntax of the resolution. B is over limiting. There also already existing cooperation loses to inherency or doesn't have any quantifiable impacts, as no one right about the degree of cooperation needed to solve an impact. And C is arbitrariness. Everything is new security cooperation. No standard for what cooperation is already existing. Internal link terms, limits, and D is in functional limits. EU, unilat, and DOS counterplan say no. Other words, and E is reasonability, prevents substance crowd. Onto regulations counterplan. 1 is permitted, but the counterplan sets regulations on military AI according to the plan text, and the plan only bans laws, which means you can do both. And 2 is permitted, the counterplan. 3, NATO is key. The Hakela evidence isolates the NATO standards of the gold standard in the industry, meaning no U.S. spillover claiming the 1NC show means it doesn't solve, and also doesn't ban Turkey. That's bad. We'll read more impact on Turkey later if needed. And 4 is bans are better than regulations. HRW 16. Critics ban because they prefer a regulatory framework that will permit the use of tech within certain predefined parameters, and regulations will not be effective as a ban. An absolute ban on autonomous weapons will provide advantages that will maximize the protection for civilians, prohibit the existence of weapons, and be easier to enforce, and maximize the stigmatization, creating and recognizing the norm and influencing the ideas that do not join. And once weapons came under a regime, and they'll be vulnerable to misuses and enforcement of regulations, and could be challenging and leave room for error. And 5, there's a double bind here. The Rapkin 17 evidence concedes that autonomous weapons are bad. It's either they are bad and they lose office on a dissent, or they aren't bad and lose office on a regulations and a UN counterplan. Onto the counterplan. 1 is onto the UN stuff.
1, preemptive both, and 2, don't preempt the counterplan. 3, NATO is key to have it enforced via a new provision in the NATO constitution that would enforce all members in the organization to ban laws. It's impossible for the United Nations to do that. Also, NATO is the only organization with logistics expertise in the international norms power over AI to execute a complete ban. That's Hegula and Rito. And the UN is a mess for AI since the 4th year in 2021. There are lack of regulations that UN is considered a challenge for more effective technologies, and many systems have been developed and abandoned without being integrated and trusted. And AI is difficult to obtain, particularly in the United Nations, are highly political and affects very vulnerable populations. And for South Arabia vetoes, and they love laws. Only NATO standards lead to ILO spill over Hello 21. And militarization will be a force multiplier for UAE and Saudi Arabia, 2 countries worse in advancing AI and boost their economics, and experts also carving a niche in the best part of the market by adding AI capabilities. Militaries will realize benefit from AI with the limited size of the UAE's armed forces, increasing integration of AI allows for defense task speed for increasing autonomously and assignment. Saudi Arabia makes an AI cornerstone, and Saudi has data AI release a multi-phase strategy that aims to position the nation as a global leader. And 5 is no net benefit to one-shot UN credibility. Every other NATO policy thumps UN power. And 6 is UN credibility is tagged Machani 22. Ukraine plunged the UN into chaos and security council convened and immediately invasion. And Russia uses veto power to block or draft, and reaching any kind of agreement is likely to be cumbersome and sluggish. And extending onto this, they weren't able to isolate how they pass laws in the UN, which means that if they're and you don't know, you're basically gambling, because if one country says no, then plan's gone. And current 7 is permitted plan and counterplan over artificial intelligence. Counterplans must be textually and functionally competitive and key to objective. And after 8 is international fiat as a voter. Unpredictability makes it impossible to garner office against, and inevitably devolves into world peace. Counterplan is not real world, and 195 multiplied by the individual agencies and end up engaging impossible. The app only gets the fiat. The US actually cooperates with NATO, and the net gets the fiat. All countries of the UN is abusive, and 9 is it links to the net benefit. And I'll go to the DIB this side. 1 is no leadership impact fail is 20. The world remain equally peaceful, and the US got forces of the 90s, and as well as the double spending of the net unrelated to stability. And Africa is peaceful, and something for which hedge cannot trade against stability exists in many places, which hedge and the egocentric mind suggests that US policymakers overestimating their own importance, and American exceptional has been in their exceptionalism, and explanation for stability may prove difficult to reverse. None of the contributing factors and interdependence, and institution democracy norms, and seems to have disappear, and the world will continue no matter what. And reinforcement unlocks global governance. Campanella 19. Constant strategy requires a great powers and and accommodation to maintain stability, and a constant strategy will be the US to collaborate and embrace the joint decision making, and constant strategy de-escalate great power competition by giving US hedge, and transitioning will require the retrenchment, and the US can engage in moderate and retrenchment while maintaining commitments, and a constant strategy can enable the robust global governance, and a constant strategy would enable the US to accept a normal contestation and generate the rules for governance, and it would enable the drastic shift away from fossil fuels to avoid climate apocalypse, and international coup are all responsible for declining competition, and global governance solves distinction. Bailey 18. Balance the pandemic cross borders, and global governance will end our conflict and deal with emerging tech, and the most important is institutional risk and nuclear weapons, and bioengineering, superbugs, nanotech are out of control, and increased global coordination are needed to combat these risks, and effective global governance to tackle these issues. Without it, we may not be able to avoid existential risk or regulate the dangerous task, and tech and power transitions are more peaceful than dominance. McDonald 18. Bid for hedge are rare, and they will never succeed in structure encourages a moderate policies to define the rising powers accommodate for assigned defensive agreements and initiative future swimming, and the pictures of powers is ready for trouble and avoiding power shifts and appear analogous, and rate its visibility declines, and accidents increases, and people reduce their speed and rising and declining powers, and man's uncertainty and through moderation is not shifts but stability that are dangerous. 5 seconds left. There's no way banning laws is what uniquely triggers the DIB industry to go bankrupt. I'm good for cross.
Okay, cool. Let me pull a timer. Okay, starting on the case page with the inherency, your card that you were citing or read, the human rights card, how exactly is this an inherency takeout? Or is an inherency proof?
No, okay. So you read arguments saying that the US has made it clear that the use of laws needs to have human intervention. We post-date your card because the card, or I guess the directive on autonomy and weapon systems that was published by the DoD in 2023, which is 4 months or 5 months after your evidence was written, defines autonomous weapons as this. And you know that this is by the US because it was published by the DoD. So your NATO
Okay,
20.
yeah. We'll move down the page. Okay, so then on the HES 20 card, your response to it, you said that we haven't provided any other better alternative AI tech. What other AI tech are you thinking could replace laws?
Doesn't really matter. All we need to prove is that your
then
card.
on the reps claim on the framing page, is that a spill up claim? Spill up out of round claim? Would you say?
Confused. We just said representations matter the most. Like, well, I mean, if you really want to go for that and like say we're making a spillover claim, sure. We just think that debating with good representations is good, like, because it shapes our politics, and bad representations lead to like bad policymaking.
Okay, shapes our politics as in like the debaters in this room's politics, or like shapes hypothetical states' politics?
Could be both. I don't really understand
Okay.
why that's super important.
Okay, and then on the T page, how do you meet the DSCA 19 card?
Okay, so to explain you the plan, it's existing cooperation over laws via standard. We'll make the argument that we increase.
Wait, what are you saying the plan text is?
Okay, the plan is a provision for defense articles and services. We add a new article to NATO's policies that ban laws.
Where does it specify in your plan text that you're adding a new article?
I don't understand why the plan text needs to like list out every single solvency mechanism.
Okay, cool. And then
that we-
on your point D on the like standards page, you say prefer functional limits. What's the argument here?
you get access to all the different arguments that we listed.
Okay, and then on the perm page on the regulation CP, does that mean that there's like military AI that the plan doesn't account for? Like when you said like regulations are only on military AI? Like, are there other forms of laws that
The plan text just says minimal just principles for military AI. The plan is hyper specific to laws. You can do both.
Okay,
ban
that's time.
and then
Thank you.
do AI regulations on everything else.
Our like text or like our like chat box on our screen is like blocking the view of our opponents. So I'm gonna close that and then I'm gonna start running prep. Eight minutes starting now. Stopping prep, 2:49 left.
All right. So I don't have a lot written out, so we're gonna call this a stand-up thank you speech. Um, so first and foremost, I'd like to thank my partner, Kaden, sitting right next to me. Like, we've been debating together for 3 years, and at this point, we're inseparable. We can't do anything debate related without each other. And that's for a reason, because like Kaden has been my rock throughout this entire thing. We got through COVID together. We put our partnership in place like a week before COVID went out, and we lasted through that entire thing, which is really just like, it shows how well Kaden can like empathize with where I'm coming from, and especially the fact that I was doing basically no high school debate before we became partners, and they really helped me jump right into like our JV levels, and then especially like all the kinds of debate tech terms and that kind of thing. Like, we joke that I'm a goldfish on my team, but the reason why the reason why I actually have so much success through that, even with some things that I forget, is because of Kaden. They've really helped me through that. And then larger than that, I wanted to thank the like coaching staff at Central. Like Kaden mentioned them earlier, Marshall, Juniper, and Jens. All of them have just supported the team in their own unique ways. I think Marshall has supported our partnership more specifically, but Juniper and Jens have really created the atmosphere on the team that has been needed and has really helped our team grow in terms of number of debaters, but also how supportive we are of each other. And I wanted to thank like the team members again, like the kind of support we got from them, especially for this tournament, but just overall, it was really heartwarming and really nice to feel they're like either helping us prep or just kind of like joking with us to help reduce our stress. So that was really important. I also want to thank the MNUDL staff, just generally. Kaden mentioned specific people earlier, but the community vibes at the MNUDL are the reason why I still debate. There's definitely some hard debate times, but the MNUDL really is trying to purposely create an atmosphere of community and support, and it has very much been noticeable, especially in how I have grown within debate. I have been able to step into more of a leadership position or a support position, and I would not have been able to feel comfortable doing that without the just amazing community behind me. And then shout out to Ms. Hoxford being the one to like introduce us to debate and being able to coach with her, our middle schoolers. That's just been an amazing experience and has really helped me see the other side of debate as an activity and has helped me find new parts of this activity to love. I want to thank my parents. They have not been able to really see any of our debates at all. And I know that's kind of been hard on them to know that this is a very important activity for me, but not really know what goes on. And so I wanted to thank their like just continual support and just letting me do this and being like, okay, we trust you with what you're doing and where you're going with this. I want to thank Mr. Oyen, my music director. I am missing the music trip by going on this, going to the tournament. And he was really supportive in like, we're going to miss you, but I hope you do really well. And apparently he was very supportive of our success during the trip. So and some more joking things. I want to thank the Rose Bowl tournament and the creative argument contest, which is a joke argument contest. It has really helped me. Like, writing joke arguments has helped me understand debate arguments, which is really silly. But it genuinely, I have gotten so much unique joy out of writing joke arguments, and that tournament has really been like important to me not being stressed constantly for tournaments, that kind of thing. Special shout out to Seabass and the Dino Earth argument. You can see it on the MNUDL stickers from this year, but it's stuff like that that just really makes this community special with our like little internal jokes, kind of, but jokes we're so ready to share. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll download the speech and send it out. All right, I sent it out. Okay, confirmation, even just visually, because we can see some of the screens. All right, got some thumbs up.
What's the order?
Yeah, so the order will be the UNCP, the regulation CP, the DIBDA.
The pet that is on camera right now is adorable. I'd just like to throw that out there. Very good pet.
Yeah, we can only really just see the cat ears on our screen, but oh, cat! Oh, this is the one good part about online debate, other than the fact that we can have this like live stream.
Yeah.
All right. If everyone is ready to go, yeah, shout out verbally if someone isn't. Okay, first in the UNCP, they had like this theory embedded into it. So we're going to like bring this out and make sure this isn't a voter, because it really just isn't. First, on an interpretation about like international fiat, this is just like a bad interpretation for debate, because that severely reduces the amount of neg ground, especially for an international topic. It means for a topic that affects the globe, we should only look at the US. That's just not how impacts work either. We're talking on a global scale. Second, counter-interp, the neg can present any actor as a CP as long as it has been an established actor in international politics. And then 3, reciprocity, the AF gets to fiat NATO as an international actor. We do too. This takes out all of their impacts on this. And 4, no fiating of countries takes out clash. It's a major international body. And 5, past years have gotten the state CP, like the NGA CP and more. No reason this year should be any different. Their interp over limits and rules us out of all actor CPs. And 6, they say it's not real world, it's very much real world. There's more than one international body at work in the world. And the point of the neg is to prove that the app doesn't solve best. So if a different body solves better, that is backed by how the world works and standard neg ground, the negative interpretation is better and more real world. Also, this is like a UNCP. It's incredibly predictable. This is the largest international body. We're not like fiating this tiny little thing that covers 2 countries. Next on ground, the AF interps fairly over limits to basically only on case and domestic DAs. This kills basically any kind of neg arguments that have any nuance to them, as well as just good arguments in general. Third, this is actually an RBI on education. It's key to learning about international organizations in debate, and at worst reject the argument, not the team. All right. Next, extend Garcia 22. The UN solves best because of the biggest and most diverse international community. It is a unique form that captures the ideals of most countries while also holding authority. So just the process of how the UN works separately from NATO is a form of solvency. Also, they have more members. Their arguments for NATO are centered about how like it impacts large numbers of countries. The UN just has more members, but also has a system set up that it promotes better communication and community between those countries. Next, UNSC's unique normative authority keeps countries in line. So I'm back 20. Active presence of the UN has resolved disputes, inhibited escalation, spurred peace, constrained both Russia and the US, never challenged core assumptions of nuclear non-proliferation. UN's efforts have hindered armament and escalation, pointing to major success for maintaining peace and security. UNSC necessity hold strong authority, shared understanding, enhance the risk the aggressor might face. Nordic shift driven by UN can bring nations together to protect peace and security. China and Russia agreed to humanitarian intervention stopped Gaddafi from proceeding with crimes against humanity. UN nations are overcoming their differences. So that takes out their point number 6 about thumping. No, the UN can work and has been shown to work on specifically humanitarian matters. And then also UN credibility isn't our net benefit, so their point 5 and 6 doesn't matter. Also next on to the perm, no perms work, flow all perms is severance with deck fairness for pre-round prep and in-round class, and perm do both decks UN leadership, which is key to checking climate change. And then no perm do both. These are different actors. That's literally the entire competition. Yeah, and then perm do the CP is just full severance. They're saying that the CP works better. They didn't explain any perms, so you should hold all perms to highest standard for explanation for the mechanism. They demand we explain our mechanism. They should also be held to that. Next, onto the regulation CP. Perm do both is mutually exclusive and is functionally the AF, meaning it still triggers the DIB link and it still results in a band. And 2, perm do the CP is severance. CP text excludes NATO, which is crucial to the AF and makes the negative a shifting target and is a reason to reject the team for fairness and education. And next, 3, extend Galliot 18, the counterplan hard codes ethical parameters into laws. That just solves all of case. And the extend Galliot 22, that status quo guidelines make AI laws rollout impossible without DIB collapse, and the CP solves that because it isn't a ban or guideline. And then extend Rabkin 17 CP guidelines, create accountability for users of laws, make use of laws more responsible. And so this helps with their point about how people should be held to ethical standards. The CP solves that better. And minimally just principles ensure NATO follow on. That's Galliot 21. Ethical principles, once they proliferate, are amended in the same way civilian principles as have all sorts of military players will find them useful in developing future technologies, strategies, concept training, etc. These will be useful in overcoming notions advanced in favors of holding AI weapons. All individuals must exercise due diligence and every actor are contributing to potential risk. Minimally just AI systems are technically feasible, would be accepted by the public given the humanitarian benefits, and stands a strong chance to be accepted by other nations. Enhancing interops such would meet requirements of all Western nations, getting the focus on respect rather than on killing. They said that like us saying that bias is inevitable is wrong, but like every human has bias, and that is much harder to like look at human code to take out, but we can do that for AI. Next onto the DIBDA. First, on uniqueness, extend the mortar intelligence 22 card. The U.S. defense industry is growing now. It's retaining current market structures now and is expected to grow into billions in the next 10 years. That's key to future defense markets. And extending the link that laws bans are terrible for defense industry. Defense agencies rely on autonomous weapons because it has dual use features with other parts of commercial sectors. It's bringing in investments from outside investors. Banning prevents that. That's Castro McLaughlin 19. They had no explanation on their no link argument, so you should defer to the next detailed explanation on the links. Also, extended contend, this is key to the defense industrial base and the defense U.S. defense military in general, which is key to hegemony. So that hegemony solves great power work. Halazad 11. The closing the gap between the U.S. and its rivals can intensify geopolitical competition among major powers and undercuts our will to respond to crises because of risk of escalation. The longest peace among the great powers has been the result of U.S. leadership. Multipolar systems have been unstable, resulting in frequent crises and major wars. Retrenchments could have devastating consequences. Regional powers could earn, and there would be a heightened possibility of all-out conflict. And next, extending the Yudkin 10 part about transitional wars that would happen without hegemony. Next, China feeling causes global instability and violence. No alternative to hegemony. Haas 17. A shift away from the U.S.-dominated world is underway. They also remains unknowable. China's interest in institutions seems to mostly bolster influence rather than to help set up rules. China will promote various security mechanisms in Asia. Less clear on whether China is prepared to restrain North Korea and how India and Pakistan will avoid conflict and resolution of Asia's territorial disputes is all too easy to imagine. A Pacific future characterized by higher spending on arms and thus more susceptible to violent conflict. The Middle East is suffering unprecedented instability. And next, hegemony is necessary to solve peace, and its absence causes war. Wall of 8. empirical studies implication is that the competition is unlikely to cause great power conflict in unipolar systems. In empirical literature, the only structure to influence conflict probability is unipolarity. A number of studies support that ambiguous hierarchies increased for 2,000 years exhibit precisely the behavioral properties implied by this theory. East Asian between 1300 and 1900 was unipolar. Warfare was rare and outbreaks occurred when China's waned, reduced the clarity of hierarchy and increased status dissonance for lesser powers. Theory and evidence demonstrate convincingly that the status is driver of behavior. So just generally, we have proven the link that pull out bans that are precautionary before, like, we have seen these impacts directly hurt the defense industrial base. It hurts the future purchases and the future investments into the market right now that will be used for more than just laws AI, because that AI spills over to civilian uses like AI in vehicles or in different kinds of civilian circumstances. So just a all-out ban is doing way too much, but and it only hurts the defense industrial base and not the people that are actually using laws. As time, I am open for cross-ex.
Okay, are we good? Okay, starts now. Reverse voting issue on education, describe.
Yeah, so that's saying that your attempt to limit us to only the US and domestic actors is actually worse for education,
What
and
about the
it kills.
Okay, what about the interb limits you to only national actors? Because you said you could work with other international actors, you just can't fiat.
So that kills any kind of solvency for CPs. CPs rely on fiat just like
Fine.
plans do.
Okay, like the Germany counterplan allows for US bilateral cooperation. Like, that's not fiat. You're still working with Germany. Why does that not solve your interb?
We're not running the Germany CP, so
Yeah,
I'm
but I'm
not.
just saying, like, there's topic specific counterplans that allow for engagement with other nations that doesn't require fiat. So I don't understand how that's a reverse voting issue.
Well, we're saying that this is common neg ground for fiated CPs. We're talking about, like, we brought up the state CP and NGA CP for domestic topics. So it is okay for CPs
how
in
many
this
states
topic
are
to
there?
use international
Okay.
actors.
Okay, I was gonna ask how many states are there compared to the nations in UN, but it's fine. Okay, we can talk about. Okay, we can talk about the regulations counterplan. Like, how is this responsive? Like, ensuring that NATO follows on. Like, how do you ensure that?
So that's just like how we have seen different kind of ethical principles been put in place since NATO has been created, but also just generally when there are good ethical principles that are being enacted on lower
Okay,
levels,
what is one
it will
example?
spill up.
What is one
Mhm.
example of US action leading to NATO spill up?
So sorry, I'm trying to think of examples. Do you have any? US examples of spill up to NATO? I'm thinking of different, like, weapons regulations and
One I
like
see from the
technologies.
Okay, the one I see from the outset describes how US action within NATO is key. Why is this not a better option since you can't guarantee spill up?
So it's functionally the same, not functionally the same, but it's functionally talking about the US's, like, importance in NATO. So we're both saying that the US is important for NATO spill up, but this is more talking about the regulation side of things and not the ban side.
Okay, I don't understand why the perm to both doesn't solve. Plan text says limit military AI. The plan bans laws. So you can ban laws and also do military, like, limit military AI in every other sector that's not laws. So how is this not functionally competitive? Or like, okay, no, how is
because
the perm?
A, the net benefit, and B, you're acknowledging that there are problematic AI that the plan doesn't cover. So that's just a solvency deficit for, like, military
I don't
AI.
understand why the plan needs to cover all of problematic AI. Can you answer
It's
that?
not what I was saying. Do you want to use prep for that?
No, it's fine.
Cool.
Okay, one our order is going to be T and then case. I'm downloading the cards right now. Lauren, we don't have the chat open, so I can't see if you type a response, but were you able to access the files?
Yes, thank you. Don't worry about me.
Okay, swag. Okay, let me know when everybody's good to go.
Can we get order?
Yep, TKs. Anybody not ready? Okay. Starting on the topic of the page, dealing with the interp and the violation. 1, a decrease in quantity is a decrease in security cooperation. That's Buckley 06 is a decrease in quantity from the pre-existing standard that must be there in order for an increase to be able to be determined. And next, we do have a definition of security cooperation. I'll read it now. 1, security cooperation means building and applying U.S. military strategies to foreign security forces, FSF, Scott 17. Interactions, programs, and activities with foreign security forces, FSF, and their institutions to build relationships to help more U.S. interests, enable PNs to provide the U.S. access to territory, infrastructure, information, resources, and or build and apply their capacity and capabilities consistent with U.S. defense objectives. This means that in order to be an increase in security cooperation, that would have to increase the amount of programs and activities, aka increase the number of laws and the quantity of laws that are able there. It also specifies that it enables PNs to U.S. access territory, infrastructure, and information. Means that in order to qualify as an increase in security cooperation under the definition that you should prefer, which I'll get onto later, you have to be able to increase the infrastructure and information, meaning the increase in the laws as a result of it. In order to be topical under these two definitions, and their card is not preferable. Predictability is the argument that they use, but we'll use it here. Prefer it has an actual intent to define. Well, there's this crosscut. Their card never actually seeks to define what security cooperation it is. It just uses the term vaguely, and then they try to crosscut it into having an actual definition where this card specifically is laying out. Beyond that, it's for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, meaning that is the most specific and most accurate to the policy world, meaning it's preferable. And 4, they literally don't even meet their own. There's literally nowhere in the plan text, nor have they provided any evidence to prove that the plan would implement any kind of dark fence articles. It's on the app to be able to provide this. Otherwise, they don't even meet their own thing beyond not meeting ours. So their violation has been proven. Onto the standards, page 1, limits. NATO has thousands of tech-based initiatives with security cooperation, allowing for a topic where the affirmative could decrease. Literally, any of these would be terrible for night prep burdens because there would be functionally no DAs, 2 minuscule to initiatives, which means that nothing can check these. If NATO dismantled the 1 cyber outpost for Luxembourg, that would be topical and increases better because there has to be actual solvency advocates talking about what the new technology and all of our dissets would apply, and any other links, reasons they increase limits. You find it, or oh my God. It turns predictability because we can't prepare and debate multitude of affirmatives under the definition that there isn't any fair or educational benefit of the interp. And 2, returns reasonability offense because if we can't sufficiently debate the affirmatives and there isn't any education. And 3, all the benefits of a debate come from its research and iterative testing. That's benefit because when we have a limited targeted, because it allows us to think of the 3rd and 4th level response lines and develop the multiple types of arguments. A topic with a higher amount of asks means that their research is shallow and generic, which is works for educational benefits and debate, and then a topic limited. And on the arbitrariness points, the definition for what is already existing is literally just increasing the quantity upon NATO type initiatives that are like already existing. It's literally just like, is NATO doing a thing? And you are increasing, okay, swag, like it's already existing. It just means that NATO's doing it. That's not arbitrary. On the voters extend education, extend that the lack of limits means that the AF kills the first type of education we get, which is prevent research. We have no way to predict and research apps, and the lack of ground means that we have no clash in round killing. The second type of education debate is based on education and only gets funding without, and the only way that it gets funding is through education. And on fairness, no limits means the NEC has no way to predict the research of the AF could literally be anything, meaning every debate is hugely skewed AF with no generic ground either ruins and clash and makes it even more AF-sided, effectively killing debate as a competition and eventually debate as a whole. Meaning that once we prove the violation, which you already buy, they didn't contest the terminals on that, meaning that they are that they kill debate if you vote negative on this because of the result of this. And onto the case page 1. On the framing page 1, extend the calculation is good and ethical. That's Livermore 8. In order for it to benefit the most people, it's important that consequentialist be first. If there is something that stops structural violence, it would be good under consequentialism. But if it's bad under consequentialist framing, then it will impact those who are hurt. Structural violence or under structural violence worse. Climate change is an example upon it. Consequentialism says that we should stop climate change, and this is important because also beyond that, climate change is going to impact the people who are impacted under structural violence the worst because of the locations of where they are located and
lower income places are going to be impacted by like rising flood rates and stuff along those lines. Like climate change proves that consequences doesn't just completely wipe out anyone who's impacted by structural violence, and it doesn't prop up whiteness beyond that. And there's no spill up out of round on their reps point. Otherwise, every time a cap K has been run, we would have like literally seen the revolution. The utilitarianism is the most justified. Deontology justifies horrible things like murder as long as the justifications are good. Only consequences are the best for everybody involved. Also, it's most of a role for debate exportation skills as policymakers use util, and it's important to debate with it for education. And on the solvency page, extend has 20. The argument is that, or sorry, actually, no, still on the framing page. 1, default to consequences. Anything else is tautological and irrational. Green 10, scientists telling us moral judgment is not rational because of this. It is extremely unlikely that there is any coherent theory that can accommodate moral institutions. Deontology talk about humanity seriously, but this defines deontology in terms of values that are not just simply deontological consequences by other persons and refrains from treating them as mere objects by counting every person's well-being a consequence active according to reasons that rational creatures can share gives equal weight to everyone. Such if you ask why it's wrong to put someone to say 5 answers will be tautological. And on to the solvency page, extend has 20. The argument is that bias is easier to solve in AI systems than it is in humans, meaning that the examples like trying to train biases out of security guards applies to military examples. It's the least biased system and has less racial discriminations than what humans do. It doesn't need to be better than other AI. In like a sense, it's better than what is humans, which is the alternative that would be in place if it wasn't laws doing it. And laws reduce casualties. Claire 19. These systems once fielded would accompany how groups, ground troops, and crewed vehicles in combat trying to reduce use social of enemy fire. The development and deployment of autonomous weapon systems offer undeniable advantages in combat comparatively cheap and clean. Covered 24 hours a day without the triangle robotic warriors could help reduce US casualties when equipped with advanced sensors and artificial intelligence. It's time. Do you want a marked copy? I just marked it at artificial intelligence on the Claire 19. All the other cards were fully read. Okay, I'm going to take that as you don't want a marked copy. Are you running prep?
You're unmuted. 7:34 starts now.
Okay.
Mute. Okay. 220.
Not to be that guy, but did y'all call prep like a hot sec ago? Because I had 205 left.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we told the people in the room 220, they can confirm, and then
Okay,
it took,
cool.
like, yeah, we don't have access to the mic, sorry.
No, I get it. I just, okay.
We'll take like 2 more seconds.
The roadmap is gonna be case T, the regulation CP, the UN CP, the DIB, DA.
What time did you call prep on this for the second time?
212.
Okay, thank you.
Can you repeat the order again a little slowly, please?
Case, framing is gonna be there, and then T, the regulation CP, the UN CP, and then the DIB, DA.
We'll take like 2 more seconds of prep starting now.
Is everyone good?
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the order one more time? I'm so sorry.
It's gonna be case T, the regulations CP, the UN CP, and then the DIB, DA.
Where is framing on the case page?
It's like right at the bottom, so it's gonna be
Okay.
case and then framing.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, we'll take more seconds. 2 starting now. $143.
Is everyone good? Okay, I'll just start. No. Case, vote after ban laws lead to autonomous technology has inherent flaws in the system that are racist, sexist, and problematic. There are weapons deployed and still being developed in the status quo that have numerous dangerous consequences. The development will doom countries affected by them into racialized oppression and lead to more authoritarian control. The impact is dehumanization, the turn lead to all of the world's atrocities. The break is a sliding scale. The more we wait, the worse. Onto framing. Extended framing of the ontology. We are responsible for the consequences after we make an ethical choice. It ensures that you don't commit bad acts for a good result. Except framework. We should be doing our best to minimize our oppression. The first is Matthews. The prioritization of extinction is the very problem and debate that when we shift things to position and interest instead of helping others, it refuses to see structural impacts because it is akin to a rounding error instead of an import issue. This is a horrible way to view the world, as it allows people to defend anything with little justification as long as it solves. Second, extend MISCO. The 1% is risk doctrine with extension is intellectually incoherent and is irrelevant in the real world. There are dozens of risks around us, and it would be impossible to deal with all of them all at once. And we need to prioritize which one, the ones to resolve first. Low probability, high magnitude, and impact claiming bad. Consequences don't matter as long as you make the most ethical choice. That's good. Consequenceless thinking that said MLK is responsible for the deaths that were ensured during the process. That's obviously bad. As long as you make the right choice, that's a good, because not banning laws increase dehumanization. Not banning them in order to prioritize some far-fetched extinction impact, ignore structural violence in the status quo. They dropped the role of the battery with a question coming out of the block. Now it means your job is to only only vote for the team that best solves structural violence in the scope. No new arguments or pivots in the two are to be cross applied. It's over. Onto T. Topical actions matter, not topical words. The plan text shouldn't be evaluated or policy being passed in NATO. It obviously requires a revision in NATO laws too. The decrease in cognitive quantity of infrastructure can be done by increasing security cooperation, increasing SC. It's a provision in defense articles. So yeah, but this is possible through decreasing infrastructure. Three functional limits. They got access to 2 counterplans and a dissent. 4, we are predictable. Banning losses a core app. Increasing resolution doesn't mean it's an existing program. They dropped the over limiting that every app could lose to inherency. Also dropped. There's no bright line for what's existing. 5, arbitrariness. Everything is new security operation. No standard for what cooperation is already existing. Internal link trace limits. They have dropped this onto regulation CP. Permanently both is functionally possible. The plan limits text limits military AI. The plan ban laws. You can both ban laws while limiting every other military AI. Here's a solvency advocate and the 1AC card, 1AC Gallia 18 for military B2B law.
It's retail.
Teal. Abandon AI weapons is part of the development of solution is to the current humanitarian crisis. The net benefit is on consequentialist ethics. You are banking on the impact to happen. They can't ensure U.S. fill of it. It means it's just that the U.S. is doing the plan that's horrible. NATO was key. That's Rudo and Hikala, which both went dropped. They also dropped multiple cards that said bans only solve circumventions are a risk with regulations. Onto UN. UNCB. Purdue shows an internal because it looks like NATO following on with the UN counterplan fails. Only NATO has the ability to promote broad norms over AI. That's Rudo. They drop all of our NATO key warrants in an extension in the 2AC. The app is a new provision in the NATO constitution which forces all organizations to ban laws. UN can access NATO provisions. No net benefit. The answer to the proposal proves NATO existing would crowd out UN leadership. That's inevitable even without the current ban because NATO still exists and there's tons of SC. International appeal. International appeal is not a reverse voting issue. You can access international actors without fiating them. Saudi number. They dropped the Saudi says no to the plan because it is required in the alliance and they all circumvent even if they try to ban the plan. It's better to do with NATO since we don't give them a chance to circumvent. Also perm other issues. UNCP. They have dropped this perm coming out of the block. There's absolutely no returning from this. Extend or interim. Perm to the planet, perm to the counter plan. Overall artificial intelligence solves the internal. The perm does their process overall cooperation, which is sufficient. The perm is sexually legitimate because it includes all of the plan and some of the words of the counter plan. The perm is functionally legitimate because it doesn't include any action done none of the plan nor counter plan. Even if the perm is functionally interested, that's good. The counter plan should be textually and functionally competitive. And we get perms that are both. Prefer one artificial net benefits is predictable and causes net benefits is not government. That makes debate impossible for the app because they can't be in this as to block cycling. They omit topic research, topic specific research, making the debate about arbitrary agents or evaporating educational value of debate because apps move to the margins to find new narrow divisions. Text non-intrinsic is sufficient. We get forces careful is text writing, and the app can't attack on anything outside the barriers of the command plan text onto the DIBDA. They fail to do LLB on the specific scenarios of our impact turn on hegemony. Banning laws collapses the DIB, which forces retrenchment of hegemony into global governance. Global governance solves extinction. Joint decision-making concern, non-formation, and multilateral governance are necessary to solve compounding non-linear existential risks, such as nuclear conflict, climate change, bioweapons, and rogue AI. They drop scenarios. That's Bailey and Papilla. The hedge doesn't solve wars. The defense spending has zero correlation with peace and counter factuals like Africa and Latin America proves U.S. dominance and undermines stability, democracy, and independence, and make the norms better explain peace and your cognitively and collide to inflate the U.S. influence because of exceptionalism and egocentric bias. That's Peter West. Their impact calculations are consequential. Even if the impact doesn't happen, it's good and it's out of control. Stop worrying about things that are out of control and make the most ethical choice about this standard. Answer to transition war. No transition wars. Impact is a flow app. McDonald's says power shift and modern the policy does dispute new defensive arguments due to mutual uncertainty about the politics, climate, decline versus peace. Not that show.
249 starting now. Time.
You're muted.
That's so embarrassing considering like how long we actually debated over Zoom. Okay.
I'm sorry. I wasn't in the room because I had to go to the bathroom, but I'm back, so I wasn't sure if you started the speech or what order.
Well, I was muted anyway, so even if you were in the room, it wouldn't have mattered. All right. So the order will be UNCP, regulation CP, DIBDA, topicality, and case. I can go through that again. UNCP, regulation CP, DIBDA, topicality, and case.
Got it. And on case, is there a particular part of the debate you're starting from, either framing or the solvency debate? Just for the sake of my flow, because I have it flowed separately.
Yeah. Yeah, framing will be on top.
Okay,
And
cool.
then
Thank you.
past that, I'll try to signpost.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right. Mic is on. Everyone is ready in here. All right. Seeing thumbs up. So first in the UNCP, we can see that the UN is structurally inept, can't solve anything. And the perms are just a test of competition. They're not an advocacy. Also on the theory that there is no RVI and at most reject the argument, not the team. Next on to the regulation CP, we concede that regulations only make enforcement worse, and circumvention kills any kind of solvency from that. And again, perms test of competition, not an actual advocacy. Next onto the DIBDA, we can see that they do not link to a decrease of DIB. Therefore, after the plan, DIB is still in place, so they can't access that impact turn of hegemony. All right, next onto T. First, extend the violations. That's Buckley 06 and Scott 17. Two, they have to have an increase the quantity of an existing tech initiative. A ban is a direct decrease. And on the Scott 17 card, in order to meet under security cooperation, they have to have an increased access to territory, infrastructure, information, and resources. And abandoned laws does literally none of it. In fact, it actively decreases the access to the FSF information and infrastructure. It's not possible for a decreasing of the quantity of infrastructure to be done by an increase in security cooperation, as that literally is contradictory on its face value. An increase in security cooperation has to include oh, I lost my place. Yeah, okay. And then three, they prefer both Buckley 06 and Scott 17 due to intent to define, meaning that those are the lenses you are weighing this through. And topical actions are not topical words is a new argument and wrong. A, they don't meet the definitions that are being used to weigh in this round. Scott 17 and Buckley 06, even under their action as they are decreasing infrastructure in plain text in a vacuum, is only fair. And even to wait to determine if it is topical, anything else fully relies on solvency and is affects to, which is bad because like go get a Coke from a vending machine would be topical as long as my impacts were connected to the topic. And three, on functional limits, simply because we got access to two counterplans and the disad, which we then had to kick, doesn't mean that we weren't screwed over on the ground. And we had access to. We couldn't get any K links, no like militarism K, no security K, no like cap K, and nearly all DAs we couldn't run. No Russia DA, no China DA, no politics DA, no trade-offs DA, and many CPs, including DoD and DOSCP. All of these are crucial net ground to every single topic. And they tried to perm both of these, which is clear severance from the plan's initial intent and functional action, which proves that there is in-round abuse on these, even when we are trying to run like any kind of ground that we ended up having to kick. And on their fourth point of predictability, banning laws is not a core topic issue. An increase in the resolutional content does mean an increase in an existing program. And the over limiting means every AF would lose to inherency wasn't dropped in the 1NR. It was implicitly covered on the limits page. And NATO has many low-level existing new tech initiatives that need more work, an increase in cybersecurity over Russia, OCOs, and an increase on biotech work to all prove that those are, and all of those are inherent. And on the arbitrariness, no, not everything is a new security co-op. It needs to be an expansion upon something NATO is currently doing. The line is just like NATO literally is already doing it. There is no internal link turn on limits. This is very clear and makes sense within the context of the topic. These are literally the only 5 arguments that were in the 1AR. Don't let them make any new arguments. Otherwise, it just proves more in-round abuse and skews fairness even more by mooting negative speech time. And then on to education. Limits and grounds are crucial to education. This is crucial to pre-round prep because we can't, without limits, we have no idea what the app will be covering. They could be covering just like a tiny little increase in one country of NATO through the actor of NATO, and we would have no ability to have any kind of argument against that and be able to prep for that. Therefore, we don't get any education from like learning and researching about the way that NATO works in the world. And also like killing ground means that, or killing limits means that without ground, then we can't even like have specific in-depth debates. So without generics and without limits, that just has like no education on this. And then, and again, they literally dropped, they have to prefer Scott 17 and Buckley 06 because those cards have intent to find, which is the most predictable. And that's one of their own standards. And they completely dropped the voters that education is the most important part of debate. And all of these standards are key to education.
Right now. Yeah. Why is that? Okay. Order is case and then T. Let me just one more slotted. All good. Okay.
On the case flow, we'll extend vote after ban laws, but there wasn't much pushback in the 200, which means that there is 100% probability of case, and they've also conceded the framing questions, which is a framing of deontology. Even though T is a procedural violation, they didn't tell you which one to layer over which. We'll make the argument that you're supposed to layer the substance of actually. They've dropped the role of the battle of the question coming out of the 2NR on the block. Now it is only your job to vote for the team that best solves structural violence in the status quo. No new arguments or pivots, and we'll make the argument that always procedural abuse. Extending case. Lethal autonomous weapon technology has inherent flaws in the system, are racist, sexist, and problematic. There are weapons deployed, and that causes racialized oppression and leads to more control. This looks like robots targeting specific POCs, and the impact is dehumanization, the internal link to all of the world's atrocities, and the brink is a sliding scale. The more we wait, and the worse it is. And we'll extend our framing of the ontology, which means that we are responsible for the consequences after we make an ethical choice, and ensures that we don't commit bad acts for a good result. And ethics matters, and the only thing that matters, and the only thing that matters is the ethical choice that we make, which means that the 1AC itself is a good idea. So any of the consequences that come after the plan passes is irrelevant, and the role of the ballot question is you're supposed to vote for the team that best solves structural violence in the status quo. And since the 1AC gets rid of all technology that exacerbates structural violence through lethal autonomous weapons, the app solves and is a good idea on the T. If we don't violate, increase means to cause increase. That's the Goldstein evidence. Also, topical actions matter, and not topical wars. They made this argument that that's not how it is. But just because the plan tech doesn't include that we add a defense provision to ban laws doesn't mean that we're not topical. The plan doesn't need to include every single step that the plan takes in order to be enacted. They're completely misinterpreting the word increase on security cooperation and misinterpreting the context of increase in the resolution. Just because the word says increase doesn't mean it's a physical increase of infrastructure. Just because it says the USFG and NATO should increase doesn't mean that they are increasing the number of things that there are, or the number of weapons there are. Rather, the increase means cost to increase, and that's in the context of security cooperation. We've defined security cooperation for you. It is the provision of defense articles. That's the discount 19 evidence. We refer to security cooperation as methods to provide foreign partners with defense articles and services. The plan adds a defense article that says we are banning laws, and that means under the security cooperation term, we don't need to increase physical infrastructure and rather increase the provision of defense articles and services. There was no inter-security cooperation that was extended in the 2NR, which means that you default to our own. But even if you don't buy and you buy their inter was something along the lines of actually, I'll get back to it later, but their we also meet it. Also, just because it's an increase doesn't mean it's a physical increase of weapons, rather it's an increase of security cooperation. And since security cooperation is a provision of defense articles, and we add a defensive article, that means that we are increasing defensive articles, which means that we meet under the resolution. There was no of security cooperation in the 2NR, which means that we win we win the precision debate for security cooperation. You are affirmative on the security cooperation. And even if increase means cost increase. And we are increasing security cooperation by increasing a provision on defense articles and services. The plan has a defense article 2 NATO that says we ban laws, and security cooperation means building and applying U.S. military strategy to foreign security forces. That's their instrument of security cooperation, but we will still meet because we increase U.S. military strategy by banning laws, which means that we meet under their own security cooperation interest. Because two, topical action does not matter. Topical wars. If you have a problem with us not having that in the plan text, it doesn't matter because the policy text, plan text shouldn't be invalidated. The policy being passed, and the substance of the policy obviously requires a revision in NATO laws, and 2, a decrease in quantity of infrastructure can be done by increasing security cooperation as long as that is being added as a provision in the defense security, and increasing security cooperation is a provision in defense articles that is possible through decreasing infrastructure. And 3 is functional limits. They get access to G counterplans, and this side you didn't need to kick because we weren't topical. You didn't need to kick because we weren't topical. We just decided that it wasn't the most strategic choice. Just because you can't research things doesn't mean that we don't link. We can still link to anything that uses NATO by using NATO unity Turkey anything that uses the NATO could be a and any Asian counterplan like the UN and DISCA, OSCE, etc. could all link in critique of arms control and how we're trying to control weapons was an argument that was made in Octos that against us, and the state links are all fair game, and a good app isn't an unfair app, and 4 is we are predictable. Banning laws is a core topic app, and increase in the resolution doesn't mean it's an existing program. They've developed they've dropped the over limiting that every app would lose to inherency because mostly no apps are, and most apps aren't an existing program. If they are, the argument that they would go for in the 2NR is is that the app already exists, status quo already thumbs, TrackOn already thumbs, which means that the app is reasonable. It's even if their interest is predictable, it's not good because it's over limiting. Every app would lose to inherency. 5 is arbitrariness. Everything is new security cooperation. There's no standard for what cooperation is already existing, which means that they need to define that in order for you to be able to fairly evaluate what the interpretation is. I'll give you an overview. We don't violate because increase doesn't mean to increase physically. Rather, increase is in the context of security cooperation. Security cooperation is a provision of defense articles. As long as we increase a provision of defense articles in the resolution and by action, then that means we meet. Good debate.
Good debate.
Good debate, y'all. We're gonna run to the bathroom real quick.
All right. Do we have everyone here, including Rhonda? Rhonda, can you come? Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you everyone for being here. It's an amazing final round. I was so excited to get to watch it. We had quite a few people in the live stream cheering everyone on the whole time. There were over 100 people from the start of the debate till the end of the debate who were enthusiastically rooting for either LAMDL or Minnesota. With just a slight bit of ado, I am going to turn things over to Rhonda for a special announcement, and then I will announce the winner of the Urban Debate National Championship.
Thank you very much, Sarah. First off, congratulations to both our teams from representing Los Angeles and Minnesota. So thrilled to sit with you this evening, and first to see that you made it home safely for the first time ever. We're having the benefit or the opportunity to host a hybrid tournament, which I know makes our tournament director, Sarah Sanchez, very happy and excited. So we added a little bit of complexity into our tournament this year. You guys were all troopers. Thank you for coming out and being a part of our tournament. It's been 4 years since we've been able to do this in person. And I have to say, the only thing standing between you and the decision, the judge's decision, is me. But I promise I'm going to make it worth your while. So for the very first time, we at NODL are excited to award a scholarship to our finalists, and the winners of the tournament and the runners-up all receive, courtesy of our sponsor, law firm Boies Schiller Flexner. You each, all 4 of you represented here today, receive a $5,000 scholarship. I see the finger snaps. Everybody else is muted. It's so thrilling to be able to announce that. And this is new for us this year. And so I'll share a few more comments and then pass it on to the judges who hopefully get to top that, at least for one team. So in addition to receiving a scholarship, you receive bragging rights. And often when this happens, there's a different amount awarded to the winners of the tournament. Our sponsor felt very strongly, recognizing the cost of college and recognizing what it takes for all 4 of you to be here. You've worked really hard, and we're just so very excited to be able to provide this opportunity for you. And so when Ms. Sanchez reaches out to confirm your mailing addresses, you will be very sure, hopefully, to respond to her very quickly. So I'll turn it back over to Sarah Sanchez, but not before congratulating her on another tournament. Very well done. She's worked so hard behind the scenes. You all don't get to see that. We at NODL do. And she works with a fantastic group of people, some of whom are volunteers, some are alumni ambassadors, to ensure that you all have the tournament experience that you have. So hopefully you are no less than very pleased. Sarah?
Thank you, Rhonda, and thank you for joining us tonight. I know everyone is probably really excited about $5,000 extra for college. We will be circling back with the details for what that requires. We have some reporting requirements and those types of things. So I will circle back with those in the coming weeks. But for now, I am very pleased to announce the decision of this debate. And this year, the decision is a 4-1 for the affirmative. So I will turn it over to the judges. Congratulations to our team from Los Angeles and the Port of Los Angeles High School for winning this year's Urban Debate National Championship. And judges, feel free to jump in with your RFDs. We have plenty of time for decisions and questions.
I can go first because I sat. I love topicality. I think more debates need to come down in topicality. But I thought this was the stronger, I think, 2-in our choice. I think that the neg for me is winning the intent to define debate on the interpretation level. I imagine that some judges, and sorry that I sat, definitely gave less weight to this, but I think for me that the intent to define was really important. And I think looking at the pieces of evidence, it is definitely clear that the neg pieces of evidence have more an intent to define than the affirmatives. And then I think the neg is ahead on the like bottom part of the flow as far as like standards and voters. I think the 1AR is pretty light on the T flow. And so I do hold the line maybe as a, former 2N where topicality is at my 2N's old heart. But I think that the 2NR approach also on like T comes first would be useful insofar as this role of the ballot thing happening. I think because I, grew up in stock issues world, that T just comes first, debate's a bathtub or something like that. And the stock issues are plugs. But I think for me, the 1AR needs the 2AR explanation on the way that the AF would increase security cooperation. Because I agree that 2AR explanation is pretty decent. It just like feels super new to me. And so it's really hard for me to vote on that level of increasing security co-op because it's so new. And I think the 2NR has a good push on like, the 1AR made so few arguments and spent like 40 seconds on the T flow, which I think is true and was like really concerning for me. And so I held the line. And I think that might be, some of the difference between some of the other judges' opinions here is I think that like 2AR explanation is good, but just too new. Like there's not a 3NR. And I also think that the F maybe needs to have some connection to existing programs. There's lots of like weapons programs, maybe regulation of AI, and feel like this would be a logical extension of the LAW's approach or whatever, which I think it could be realistically, and like NATO would come to a conclusion to ban it, and that would be cool. So yeah, I think that's part of it. I do think that the neg could get a better answer to what ends up being where the 2AR sits more, which is like the inherency push thing. And that actually gives you more neg ground. But I think that for example, like the loss of core generics, like the security K, I think for me is really massive and like DoD trade-off. So I end up voting on T.
I can jump in. First off, congratulations to both teams for not just making it to finals, but going through the whole travel from Dallas to your hometowns to even make this debate possible. So kudos to all of you, and especially to Port of Los Angeles for winning the debate. So I voted AF. I think that in my decision, the major key factor is whether issues like procedurals come before the substance of the AF. I think at the end of the debate, just to briefly respond and a little bit of a pushback to Victoria, yeah, it was a very, I'll agree that there could be more meat on the, debate in terms of the T analysis in the 1AR, but I see it a little differently as it was efficient for what it is. And I'll give you a few reasons why. One, I think that for the 2A, and it could have been a bit more fleshed out in the 2AC and in the 1AR, but the negative needs to win a jurisdiction claim as to why procedural fairness comes first, especially where there's a lot of framing questions that are not being resolved so much by the negative that I think the AF is pretty much ahead, especially in terms of things like ethical choices. So if ethical choices is first off a default framing as to how I view the debate, then issues like topicality or any procedural issue now becomes a question of, okay, does preserving the game become an ethical solution as to how I should evaluate the debate? And if that's true, then any risk of some sort of abuse by the negative is enough of a reason for me to not evaluate the case debate and thus voting negative. That said, how I resolved this debate was first on an interpretations debate. Negative in the future, you got to pick a road in terms of how you want the T debate to go, in terms of whether this is going to be like a competing interpretations debate versus a reasonability debate. I think that the AF is ahead on the interpretation question for a few reasons. I think that the Goldstein evidence, not the greatest evidence in the world. I do think one interesting line is that an increase has to just be a cause and an effect to whatever the change is, right? And I think that the fact that the AF uses and leverages the interpretation of security cooperation as, look, a provision to policies, in this case, let's say a ban for this instance, will create norms that is a actual effect that is in its own definition and increase, I think is sufficient, especially in a world where I don't get enough analysis as to why competing interpretations become like the lens that I need to determine as to whether or not the AF gets to weigh the plan. I think the DSCA 19 evidence is sufficient enough. And again, it complements the Goldstein evidence enough for me to determine, all right, well, where's the ground loss or where's some sort of abuse, especially when there's no analysis on like any sort of risk of like potential abuse, is an ethical reason to drop the AF in terms of them not playing the game well. I hear a lot of things like education key, but again, 2NR analysis on why education is like the terminal impact to the debate would be helpful, because absent that, I don't really hear enough of a reason why the AF doesn't get to weigh their case, especially where another issue is not in the 2NC, not in the 1NR, not in the 2NR. Am I hearing things like, here are topical versions on the affirmative that would meet this interpretation and thus give you access points to your case? So absent like a TVA or a clear case list that tells me, okay, this is T, then I think reasonability is enough of a reason to give the AF the case. I think that the disad loss is kind of confusing because I honestly think that there was a 2NR in terms of looking at some offense on the disad flow and even a question of the permutation from the UN debate. There was substance. I think the 2A is right. Poor strategic choice in this case. So in the end, I think that absent a bright line in terms of how these impacts determines the way I have to view the debate, I think that reasonability is justifiable in this case. And I also think it is the most ethical choice, and also making the ethical choice to avoid AF, regardless of whatever the AF does, is good enough when this is where the debate comes down to. One last comment, and this is more so for the AF. Y'all need to do, I get the overview stuff, but it's super repetitive that I didn't even bother to flow it because it's literally the same thing. In the future, I think that overviews, especially if you're going to give like a 2AC case overview, if you're going to go for the case, I think that how better contextualization of the evidence that's winning you the debate is crucial, more than just extending taglines, because I just felt like that was really the overview in a nutshell. I also think that the procedural question that was posed in the 2AR was a very good argument. And I think that you could expand that more, since that's basically the debate, right? So I think that better framing in terms of this is what the round comes down to. Here's the offense that's getting us the win in this debate. Here are the epic fail moments by the negative, no offense, but you lose because of these reasons. And, you know, close the door a lot more in terms of like leveraging your evidence better. I think the 1AR can do a lot more work on that, but I'm also not going to let the 2A get away with it because I feel like you could have done that work as well. Other than that, again, outstanding debate by both teams and congratulations.
I can go next. I mean, I largely agree with everything that Aubrey said. I definitely think that some kind of like procedural framing from the negative was missing in the 2NR that made it so that I kind of like had a difficult time not weighing the case directly against the AF. Directly against the T, because they're giving me this role of the judge about like ethical decision making, and I'm not really getting any like in-round abuse. Like I think that in the 2NR you claim that the severance on the perms was in-round abuse, and that was like the evidence for the in-round abuse of your topicality violation, and I just don't think that held any weight for me, because what you accused them of severing out of was NATO. It wasn't like a ban. So I was like, well, that's not contextualized to the topicality violation. So I'm not really getting any kind of like in-round abuse of how you're being denied education. And then I also think that you're like listing a bunch of arguments. You're just like saying, oh, none of these are
going to work. And I think actually some of them kind of would. Like, I don't really see why the securitization critique wouldn't link. And I actually also think that, like, forgive me if this is incorrect, but for St. Paul's, I kind of expected you to come in with a different 1N strategy than this. I was expecting a critique, and especially after the 1AC, because they spend so much of the 1AC on framing evidence that honestly is more useful for a neg critique. So you basically could have just snatched all that framing evidence right out of their 1AC. They spent like 2 minutes reading framing evidence that you could have just taken. And with like a security K, like literally any critique probably could have resolved their framing better than the 1AC is doing. So I think this idea that you didn't have any ground just didn't work for me when you're listing arguments that I think you very well could have won on. And I think that your arguments, like, you had a ton of specific evidence to laws, like your whole regulations counterplan was specific to them and the DIB link was specific to them. So I'm just not getting that kind of in-round abuse. I will say for AF here, I think there was a lot of missed opportunities. I cannot believe I judged you during NODL pre-eliminations. And in those pre-eliminations rounds, I told you not to drop international fiat bad, and then you did it in front of me again. And I think like the analysis coming out of the 2NR when they kick out of the UN counterplan on the international fiat bad theory was incredibly insufficient. And even if you're not going to spin an entire independent voter, both topicality and that international fiat bad are procedural voting issues. So you could have at least used that to be like, look, even if there is some kind of like vague potential topicality violation, they also did a procedural violation when they fiated the entirety of the United Nations. And I think a lot of your analysis on this was pretty good. So I think that you could have used that, which was essentially conceded coming out of the 2NR, because the only thing they say is like, it's not that bad anyway. Like, they basically conceded all your offense on international fiat theory. I can't believe you did it in front of me twice in the same tournament. Stop dropping international fiat. So that's one of my big things. But yeah, so I guess I ended up deciding basically on the same thing. I think that when you're going for topicality, which I love, I just think that like you need to have, like, for any fiat bad theory, you need to have, any procedural issues. I think that you need to have some kind of in-round impact for me to buy into it a lot more. And I think that I wasn't getting enough of that coming out of the voting issues on T for me to disregard the role of the ballot and the role of the judge. And I think that if I had that kind of in-round abuse, a more specific example of why you specifically were being sort of hurt by their lack of topicality, then maybe I would have disregarded the role of the judge and reconsidered my position on T. But that was why I voted.
All right, I'll go next. Firstly, this was a really fun round, and it's been a long time since I've seen a 2NR on T that wasn't like T framework. So this really was a lot of fun. As a debater, urban debate changed my life. It is a really cool and special opportunity to be able to be a part of that for y'all. Okay, so I largely agree with what Victoria, Aubrey, Amy have said. It's really neat to be on a panel with people that I've been learning from for a long time. I didn't love the AF's definition of increase. I actually thought it was pretty weak. Increase means cause to increase. There has got to be something better than increase means increase. I don't think that got you very far. I think I also think that neg, by limiting out like the creation of all new programs, all new initiatives, and the AF is saying in like the 2AR that is what most AFs on the topic are. I think that does kind of lend some credibility to the like over limiting claim. I'm not sure where I stand on like the predictability stuff. I think like, because neg makes a couple different arguments, like at one point, saying that like we should be increasing the like programs that are already in existence. But in like multiple other places telling me that NATO has a ton of tech initiatives that would make really good apps. And I don't understand why like any of those wouldn't be as small or as unpredictable or as bad for ground as like the creation of any like new initiative or program. I definitely agree with Victoria that the 2AR articulation of like we increase the number of defense articles is late. I think it's good. And I like see where it came from. Like from the 2AC, you're clear that like you're increasing cooperation over norms and standards. And I think that that's true. I don't have a really persuasive reason at the end of the round to think that the US and NATO working together to ban lethal autonomous weapon systems is not security cooperation, or why this like addition to the security cooperation is not an increase. And I think that the AF is largely correct when it comes to the functional limits argument as well. Neg listed off, here's stuff that we don't have access to. I am not given reasons why like any of those arguments are like especially educational or especially important. Like saying, I don't know, we don't get access to like politics disads, like who cares? Like, no, politics disads are great sometimes, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't get access to these arguments. Why should I care about those arguments? And also like Amy was saying, like you might have had access to those arguments. But also additionally, AF says, okay, well, here are a bunch more arguments that you do have access to. And also you clearly have some level of access to other arguments because you read them in the speech, and the fact that like you kicked out of them and didn't feel confident like going for them in the 2NR, like that's not our problem. I think that the one, like I definitely saw going all in on T as the 2NR. I think the 1AR did a really good job of like shutting down the disad and the counter plans. Like I totally get why that was the 2NR, because yeah, I think like at the like all of this great coverage on these other flows did kind of mean that T was a little bit undercovered or efficient, depending on how you look at it. A little bit all over the place, trying to keep it short-ish, because it's been a long tournament, long week. Y'all have school tomorrow, and there are 5 judges on this panel. This was a really fun round to judge. I think that AF, while the definition for increase wasn't great, I do ultimately buy that the affirmative is an increase in security cooperation.
Yeah, so I largely agree with most things that, or pretty much everything that all the other judges have said. I start by looking at the interpretations debate. So I think a small problem for the negative is that originally your interpretation is whether or not the app is increasing, but this kind of turns more into a debate about whether or not the app is security cooperation. I think that's a smart move by the affirmative team, because depending on what security cooperation is will determine whether the affirmative had increased or decreased it, right? So I think the app's definition here is a little bit better for me because it specifies that security cooperation is defense provisions. And so they're saying that if lethal autonomous weapons are used for defensive purposes, and the AF in banning them would be a provision on some form of defense. And that would be an increase because it's cooperation between the US and NATO on that question. I think that according to that definition, the AF is security cooperation. When looking at the negatives definition, I forget the specific piece of evidence, but it's not contextualized. It does not limit out what security cooperation isn't. So I think at least the AF can say that we are probably that form of security cooperation. And so, but in addition to that, I think the AF is also kind of just reasonably topical. Lethal autonomous weapons and banning them is a core topic AF. And I think absent the negatives attempt to say what an affirmative would look like in the area of lethal autonomous weapons other than the AF makes it difficult for me to say the AF isn't what that already is. I think also the negatives description of your standards, limits, and predictability ground are not contextualized to how the affirmative specifically prevents that. I think the best area where you kind of get to this is the example for if the affirmative buys something out of a vending machine and they'll claim it's topical because of the effects of it. I don't think that applies to the F because they're specifying, they're not saying that it's not the advantages that they're reaching to say that they're topical, but rather they're saying they are a form of increasing security cooperation, which, like I said, I don't think the negative has a good response to. Yeah. So I think, like I say, I'm buying also with the case lists, you both provided some case lists to me. I agree with some of the judges' earlier analysis that like the negatives case list that's provided, first of all, again, there's not a real reason why you can't read these arguments. I think some of them probably do apply, like the security K, or I don't remember exactly the other arguments that you read, but there's no warranted reason why you don't get access to these other than you had to make the strategic decision to not go for them in this debate, but that's not a reason why the affirmative prevented you from going for those arguments. I think the affirmatives case list of the NATO disad, the Turkey disad, and critiques of how the military gets involved with the AF are, at least while generic, there are examples of arguments that you could be reading, but also I think there's more. So I do think engagement with the AF is possible. But ultimately, like I said, I agree with largely with the other arguments that have been made by the other judges. I think the AF is reasonably topical. AF team, there's not really a scenario where I'm going to evaluate that I should choose the affirmatives, I guess, sort of subject formation over the procedural question of topicality. With the way it's been presented in this debate, it's something that you only mention in the 2AR. While I think you are doing the work to prove that sort of framing question earlier, you got to do more to tell me that that's specifically why I'm voting affirmative. I think, especially from the question that was asked in cross-examination of the 2AC, I believe it was, or earlier on the debate, as to like why, what the framing question is. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I'm voting AF in this particular debate if the hypothetical world that the affirmative provides is better than the status quo. I don't think you've done the analysis to say that the subject formation provided from the AF's education would make us better people and is the reason why I should vote AF. If that's the case, I think that's possible. You could do that. You just got to do that work earlier, and then maybe I can evaluate that argument from the 2AR. Didn't create a problem for you here, but just a heads up. Like if you want to do that, you got to do some work earlier. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it was a good debate, but neg team, I think y'all just need a little bit more specificity when it comes to your interpretation, the story that you're crafting with your standards, and what the app would look like in order to be topical. Good debate.
Yeah, I mean, do any of the students have any questions for anything we just said? And you're probably all tired, but just before we go, if you have any questions for any of us.
Okay, just one question. I guess a lot of the RFD was based on T. I just kind of wanted to know if they had not gone for T, perhaps like the UN counterplan, like how do we do in like the perm debate and for both of the counterplans, the hedge impact churn and like, et cetera.
I mean, to jump in quickly on that, like y'all are winning a lot of like the permutation offense because you have like this NATO key story that you can win off the permutation. So that alone is enough of you to win or justify the functionality of the permutation. Second, and this goes to what Evan is saying, and I agree with you insofar as, you know, there's like a reps key argument that y'all don't even go for, which gives a better characterization of what it means to vote AF, right? So in this case, like our reps that shapes effective solutions, that shapes the way that we create future policy making is enough of a reason why we get to weigh the way that we frame the debate, which I guess is like all of your stuff in terms of like all the framing offense that you read in the debate. So I think that better articulation of going for the offense on the permutation would be sufficient, not to mention there's not that much link work being done on the disad, so you still get to win a case outweighs argument, right? Especially where there's not enough like impact analysis really coming out of the neg that makes you go, okay, well, it's still a 1% risk that this is still a good ethical idea, so you vote AF, right? There's no clear turn that, you know, turns any of the advantages to the affirmative, right? They're not really much of a solvency deficit to the permutation or just the case writ large from the 1AC, right? So I think like, I guess I'm giving you a very long explanation to defend the AF, right? That can be something that can help you out as a option if procedurals like T is not in play.
Yeah, I think the same thing about the perms on both. The one thing I'll say on the disad, like I think that both teams here are kind of talking past each other for a lot of this disad flow. Like, you know, like neg is saying like hedge good, hedge a stabilizer, and then you get up and you read this turn about how like global governance is good, but you're not actually saying hedge bad. And I think I'm kind of missing like, so it's like it's a turn kind of, but like it's, and then they get up and they're like, no, alternative to hedge is good, but they're not saying global governance bad, right? So it's like not really clashing with each other. You're just sort of talking past each other. And I think that that could have been potentially dangerous if they'd done more work on like the framing and stuff like that. But obviously it didn't really end up mattering in this specific instance. But I think that to me on the other off case, that's probably where you were in the biggest danger, is the fact that like your answers weren't really responsive to what Neg was saying on the DIB flow. But for your perms, I mean, like I was buying most of the perm work, and with the NATO key and like on the, you know, I think the 1AR did exactly what you needed to do, especially on the UN counterplan, because they did drop that Saudi Arabia vetoes card, and like that's really what you needed to win that. And then I also just think like maybe if the neg had been doing, because to me, if I were the negative, I would have gone harder on the regulations counterplan, because I think that's also to me, you guys were killing it on the UN flow and kind of like doing okay on the regulations counterplan. So if I was negative in this situation, I would have gone for regulation and DIB and spent most of my time there in the block. Because I think that if the neg had done more work on this in the block, I think that maybe the regulation counterplan could have been more dangerous. But I think the idea that the perm is severance just wasn't, it wasn't so much that your perms were like super good, it was just more like their answer to the perm was insufficient to me, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Thank you.
For me, I agree. I think y'all were probably ahead on the counterplan, like a substance debate. I think the one thing that I kind of wish y'all expanded more on in responding to the disad is the internal link between why focusing on lethal autonomous weapons is the linchpin to U.S. hegemony. I don't know why that's true from the negative perspective, and I wish y'all said that wasn't, and then use that as to take out their impact more.
I mean, I think you were going for a straight turn, which is why you sort of said it at the end, but I think you were trying to do a straight turn, which is why you didn't say no link, because you didn't want to give them the opportunity to eliminate your straight turn out of your offense. But I think like you kind of snuck it in there at the end, and I think it was a really strong argument. You should have developed it more. But I think that also if you had just had a hedge bad, that would have made the straight turn a little bit more offensive. But I do understand why. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you were just you wanted to make the no link and didn't do it. But I think that was my interpretation about why there was not a no link.
If no more questions. No more questions from us.
And St. Paul, do you have any questions, or I guess we can let everybody go over the night?
All right. If that is it, thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. Congratulations to both teams on making it to the final round of the Urban Debate National Championship. Thank you to all of our judges who took some time out tonight to make sure that there was a tremendous panel for this final round debate and to provide such incredible feedback to our competitors. It is tremendous to look out over this room and see representatives from so many different debate leagues, from so many different debate league staffs. It's honestly just quite the honor, and I am so appreciative for all of you. Thank you again for joining us, and good night.